Okay, just let me know when you are ready, Mr. Secretary. I don't want to get ahead of you.
Yep, just give me like 30 seconds. Just doing a quick thing here. I thought I saw Gary from the yeah, I do see Gary. Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
Let me switch to the agenda here. All right, you can get started, Madam Chair. I'm gonna
Okay, thank you.
check the chat.
All right, so we're called to order at 1:03 p.m. Mountain, 3:03 Eastern. And I am just pulling up a copy of our agenda, which I had sent out another copy just before this meeting. So it is now time for attendance, Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Yeah, I had the agenda here. That's it right there. All right. I have Gary, Mark present. Mark Brayman. Didn't
He's
see
not
him.
here. I'm attending as his alternate.
Okay, I see Paul. Hey, buddy. Joe Brunhart. Michigan. Not seeing. Josh Chapel, New Mexico. I don't think he's ever been to any meeting. Matt Choco.
I'm here, and by the way, can you all hear me all right? Audio sound good?
Yes, Matt.
All right, thanks.
Colby Clark, Washington. Sean Dempsey, New Hampshire. I think I saw Ken.
I am here. I want to make sure that I have good audio also.
A little gargled, but yeah. Okay, Josh McHose.
Here.
All right. Tim McMaster.
Present, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Dustin Nana. Thought I saw Dustin's name on the list here. Maybe not. Omar Okoro is present. Mike Seebeck.
He is absent, but I am here.
Okay. Ashley Shade. No. Mary Slim. Curry Taylor.
Here.
John Thompson.
I'm here.
All right. And then
And you forgot to mention Ted Brown also.
sorry, Mr. Vice Chair. I had you marked present. And I totally skipped you, but I do have you marked present. Okay, so we have 9 primaries here, so we're gonna obviously we're gonna need some alternates here. Clayton from Colorado is here. He would sit. Jim Cavoli, Ohio. Carolyn Cliff. Thought I saw her.
Here.
Yes. Luke Enzer. Pennsylvania. Paul Grindle is here. Sean Hickman. Janae LeBlanc. Chris Duccini. Daniel Miller. Rachel Nix, California. Starchild. Okay, then the second one's Kat Martin, Caleb Newbill, Tim Yo. Okay, so of the 3 alternates present, Colorado will sit and New York will sit. So that's 2. That gives us, I'll switch here so everyone can see. That's going to give us 11 votes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have made quorum. One moment, I'm trying to show, I'm not seeing your screen, but that I think is because of me. Now I do.
Yeah.
Let me just move that to a different screen here. All righty, so we are now at a point for opportunity for public comment, and I do see there are multiple members of the public. If anyone would like to address the committee for a few moments, please raise your hand and I will recognize you. Along the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is something that says reactions. That is where the hand raise button is. But if you can't find it, just start talking and we'll recognize you, but it's just more orderly if anyone wishes to speak, if they wish to raise their hand. So I'll give a few moments to see if anyone wishes to do that. Okay, seeing, oh, no, well, this is a member of the committee, but that is perfectly fine. Mr. McMaster.
Yeah, just in case anyone was interested, just thought I'd throw it out there. Excuse me, Pennsylvania in their, let's call it wisdom, selected me to be their lieutenant governor candidate last night. So I just thought I would share that with the group.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's one or the other.
Sometimes it's both simultaneously. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment? Okay, seeing none, I note an error on the agenda where it had approval of minutes from March 3rd. We have, and it should now say March 10th, which of course, that was only a few days ago. So I did not expect Mr. Ricuro to be up all night preparing minutes, particularly on weekends where there's a ton of conventions. When they are prepared, I actually would in advance move to defer their approval to email. I think that has been productive, approving our minutes by email. Would there be any objection that when Mr. Ricuro posts them, that they be up for a week for review, after which time, he'll make any corrections that people note that we will submit it to an email ballot. Is there any objection to following that procedure? Okay, hearing none, that's what we will do. All right, where we had left off, from what I understand, I wasn't at the last meeting. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for filling in. I unfortunately had a medical issue. Time wasn't extended, so we were in the middle of debating that last blue sentence, adding to the end of the healthcare plank, the sentence that would read, "We oppose governments either mandating or restricting voluntary access to medical treatments or procedures, including vaccines." This is where we're at. This is what's on the table. No pending amendments. This is the main motion. Would anyone like to speak to or make amendments? Anyone like to be recognized with regards to this? Please let me know. Okay, if there is no further debate on this sentence or amendments, we will be moving directly to a vote. But first, I will ask, is there any objection to adopting this language as the recommendation of the committee? Please speak now or forever hold your peace. Or hold your peace until it's reconsidered, as it may be. At least hold your peace for this meeting. All right, hearing none, that has been adopted as the committee's recommendation. So we can now move on to proposal 15, which was a new plank that was recommended by the 2020 National Platform Committee entitled Law Enforcement. If you could bring that up on the screen, Mr. Secretary.
Proposal 15, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I've got them all here. Law enforcement, there we go.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
on the agenda,
Yes.
the next meeting date is marked as March 13th.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
will be next Thursday. I apologize for that. I didn't fix that form. Thank you for that correction. So the next meeting date is next Thursday. We are meeting every Thursday for the remainder of March. This is the only Sunday meeting in March. Thank you. Okay, so the proposal now on the floor is to adopt a new plank that would be, at least it was the proposal of the 2020 platform committee, that it would be placed into section 1. They were suggesting 1.8. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat today. And it would read, "We condemn militarized policing. Therefore, we favor abolition of law enforcement at local, state, and federal levels. Government policing should be replaced with voluntary peacekeeping, such as by neighborhood watch or other polycentric defensive or dispute resolution associations." So in order to get in line to speak on this proposed amendment, please raise your hand. You guys are awful quiet today. Mr. Brown.
Well, Madam Chair, where is that wording? It's I have the committee report from 2020, and it merely says government policing should be replaced with voluntary peacekeeping, such as neighborhood watch organizations and private security. And that's all that's on the screen also. So where is that?
Oh,
wording
I might have the wrong. I'm looking at the proposal 1.8 new plank law enforcement. 1 second here.
Yeah, you might be looking at a minority report or something. I don't know.
Hold on 1 second. Let me look at this.
Yeah, look at what Omar
Yeah,
has
I
up on
see.
the screen
Because
there.
I had a different link. 1 second here. Give me 1 second, if you don't mind. But since that is what was in the report. Government policing.
That's it right there. And so I'd like to speak against that as soon as anyone is ready.
Okay, that will let me read that into the record then, because somehow I believe I had a minority report linked, and I thank you for that correction. So government policing should be replaced with voluntary peacekeeping, such as by neighborhood watch organizations and private security. I do believe what I was reading was a minority report that was a bit more expansive. All right, Mr. Brown.
Okay, I wanted to speak against that. I don't even agree with that statement at all. Basically, there's been all this defund the police movement, and it was I was talking to voters in my last campaign in 2020, and they said, how could you defund the police? And I said, people don't really want to, no one really wants to defund the police. They just want to maybe have them spend less. They want to have them do different things. They want to refocus their priorities, et cetera. And basically, a lot of people believe, and I think most libertarians probably believe, that police, courts, and national defense are probably the only legitimate functions of government. And I know anarchists would not, and I can see the point of why they would want voluntary and private security. But the worry is that at least with the government, you have some constitutional protections, but you wouldn't have that with private security. And you might have a rival private security agencies fighting each other and everything for turf and these kind of things. Frankly, I just wouldn't trust that. And I don't think we should run on a platform like that. We need to reform policing terribly. We need to reduce their activities, de-escalation. There's all kinds of police reforms there can be, but certainly I don't think most people are going to go for no police and just hope that there's a good private security firm, and then that firm might violate their rights and they might be able to sue them, but there's really no constitutional protections with a private security violating people's rights.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. I have Mr. Taylor, and then after him, I have on deck Mr. Alvstead, Mr. Ricuro, and Mr. Casciato. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, with respect to my good friend Ted Brown, first of all, I'm not an anarchist either, but I have seen private police forces work. We had a lot of discussions about this in 2020, by the way. We're kind of have to rehash some of this ground, but Fort Worth downtown police force is private. It is a private police force. It is funded privately. And it has disconnect from government to a certain degrees. People love that security force. And there are other examples that you can look across the world of private security forces either taking the place of or being somewhat supported by the local governments there. So there are private or hybrid ways of doing this in which you would not say that there would be no police force at all, or that you'd have to be just kind of rely on the roll of the dice of whatever police force that you would get. I do think I was in support of this amendment in 2020. I think it's good. However, I do understand that there are, it was much more topical back then when we were having riots all over the country about people wanting to defund the police. People kind of were talking about it. It was very topical at the time. I think it'll be harder to pass this time with regard to that. But I still would like to see at least some version of this to have the committee pass if at all possible. I think it's a good change and we need to kind of start moving in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I have Mr. Alvstead with Mr. Ricuro and Mr. Hi Shadow, Cashato, and I am actually going to add myself after Mr. Cashato. Mr. Alvstead.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I agree with Mr. Brown that we should not add this to our platform. However, I disagree. Unlike Mr. Brown, I do agree with the statement. I just feel that it doesn't meet the bar, even though it's a small plank, that we should not be adding new planks except for major subjects. And this is so far down, and this is so many years into Libertopia before this could even be implemented that I just don't think it belongs in our plank, that we should keep it to a terse statement of our basic principles, and issues like this, can be for a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvstead. Okay, I see Curry, you put your name down. Thank you. I have Mr. Ricuro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To follow up with what Mr. Brown said and others have said, so I, deep down inside, I'm an anarchist, as I think most libertarians are. And even in a perfect world, it's hard to say what policing, or I don't even like using that term, peacekeeping, that's a better term, I guess, would look like. And so this was such a touchy subject, to the point that was made earlier about last year, or last term, I should say, where it was so prevalent. And there's been so many things that have been prevalent since then that's still an issue, with race and with the police and with COVID and now with a war and different things that I felt like at the time this was a knee-jerk reaction, and I still feel like it's a knee-jerk reaction, and I don't think it belongs in the platform in the same way. Not that it doesn't belong in the platform, it's that we're getting into a weird place where we're describing things that don't necessarily sound like a platform for a political party. Going back and forth between whether we have anarchistic views or more practical views, the Accord. Just the way that this was worded, it's just not correct. I think we could probably even strengthen another part of the platform to make this same point, but this leaves more questions. This gives more questions than answers. And again, it's our candidates that have to go out there and answer these questions. And there are probably candidates right now in the country right now that are probably still having to answer this question: what should we do about the police? And there are probably places where, as to Mr. Curry's point, where there is some sort of private or voluntary police keeping and it's working. So maybe those questions aren't there. So I would say I'm not in favor of this right now. The discussion is a good discussion to have, and maybe somewhere else in the platform, but just the way this is presented right now, I'm not in favor of. Thank you.
Thank you. I had Mr. Cashato, and then I had added myself, and then Mr. Cholko. Mr. Cashato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I agree with the statement as written, but I also kind of like the secretary mentioned, this could be against the spirit of the Dallas Accords. I think there are libertarians who legitimately hold a position that could be considered within the scope of libertarian philosophy of government policing. I personally disagree with that. Not that that's relevant, but I don't think I'm currently in favor of this wording.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to speak just briefly, then I have Mr. Cholko and Mr. Thompson. Just a kind of a guidance note to the committee, and listening to the comments. of something that had gotten passed in 2018, where we had talked about voluntary funding of all government actions. And a compromise that committee reached, which did pass the convention floor, which this committee may wish to consider. I'm not asking you to, I'm just throwing this out there, that perhaps the addition of a phrase wherever possible might solve some of the concerns and address what Mr. Taylor said, showing where things have been successful and addressing the concerns where perhaps it's not possible. I am not making that amendment. I am just throwing that out there for the committee's consideration. Mr. Cholko?
Thank you. So I am personally very much in favor of the statement. And frankly, I understand the concerns that there are, and I agree that there definitely are a fair number of libertarians that probably don't exactly agree with elimination of government police. But frankly, I feel like it's kind of a libertarianism 101 sort of thing, and it's a plank that's easy for people to understand. It's an issue it's not as ripe as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still a significant issue in everyday political discourse. So I think it is appropriate for us to pass this proposal, even though we know that it doesn't have 100% agreement among libertarians. I think it's an important issue that we should be saying something about, and I think that this is the basic libertarian position. So let's go ahead and say it.
Thank you, Mr. Cholko. I have Mr. Thompson with Mr. Taylor immediately thereafter. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, thank you. So the statements raised about the Dallas Accord are well taken. I raised my hand to speak to the fact that many local candidates, this might tie local candidates' hands in elections where they're even seeking police support for things to reduce, to improve the relationship between the community and those who have delegated authority to keep the community safe from violence and other acts of aggression. So I would support an amendment to say whenever possible, but I do think that's kind of lipstick on a pig, and that this plank is more problematic than good for the purposes of a political party. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, let's give this a try. Despite the previous speaker's comments, I want to give it a try and let's see where it goes. I will move the chair's amendments to add to the end wherever and whenever possible. So I also put that language in the chat.
Mr. Secretary, are you clear?
Yeah, where does it go?
At the very end?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. I got it. I do a capital W here.
No, I believe he means it's a phrase. So no period, right? And then wherever and whenever possible. Is that correct, Mr. Taylor?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so right now, what's on the table is discussion and debate and potential secondary amendment on the amendment. So if anyone, would you like to speak to it further, Mr. Taylor?
I think it's self-evident. It does take into account certain cases where people think, private security is something that is attainable and realizable today, and in other places in where people think it's untenable, or that's just based upon the mood of the different audiences in different geographies.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me put my hand down. I appreciate the the effort here. Like, hey, let's give this a shot and see. I'm rising in opposition to this, and to the point that was made previously, that this is just putting lipstick on a pig. That was a really good analogy. It's still a problem for a political party, for a plank in a political party, even with those extra 4 words there, because we're adding more questions than answers. I mean, we could just say very easily. We want the police to be like the fire department. We'll call you when we need you. 911 is still your phone number, right? We could put that in the plank. Again, it's I agree with the overall sentiment. I do. There's a part of me that wants to eliminate government policing for all the wrong that they do, but wherever and whenever, that just opens up more cans of worms, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Madam Secretary?
Okay, Mr. Schloss, is there any objection to hearing from a member of the gallery? Okay, Mr. Schloss?
I'm just reading through the chat notes, and I mean, I think Mike Pannone wrote something very interesting that I don't know if everyone's reading that section, so I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I do encourage the committee I do continually scan the chat because sometimes some very good suggestions come up in there. So thank you, sir. Does the committee have any further debate or amendment on this primary amendment?
I do. I'm sorry. I just wanted to, can I input my-
Does the committee have any objection to hearing from Mr. Tucci? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, thank you. So I also don't disagree with the sentiment that's being put forth on this this particular issue regarding government police force, but I think it may be tying ourselves up into discussions that we may not necessarily be benefit in our favor. I do think with regards to current events and the way the situation is going as of right now, I do believe there's discussions about nationalizing our police force, which I think is actually a very big concern because by doing that, you're going to have a national police force that's going to basically govern or enforce laws across the entire country. With regards to the federal government. And I think that that might be an issue that could put into good discussions about what our government is currently doing now with regards to a police force.
Right, thank you, sir. Okay, I do not see any hands raised by further committee members. I'm just giving it 1 second. All right, we will bring the amendment to a vote. So what we are voting on is whether or not to add the phrase wherever and whenever possible to the end of the proposed new plank. If everyone is clear on what we are voting, if you could please do a roll call vote, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Madam Chair. All righty. Gary Alstead.
No.
Okay. Paul Grindle.
Aye.
Ted Brown.
Abstain.
Matt Choco.
No.
Ken Matz.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Nay.
Tim McMaster.
Nay.
Dustin Net. Oh wait, Dustin's here. No. Omar Ricaro votes nay. Clayton Cachado.
Nay.
Curry Taylor.
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
And let me get that on the screen for you, Madam Chair. 1 second. I have 4 in favor, 6 opposed. Did I miss
Okay.
anyone? Oh, and 1 express abstention. Did I miss anyone?
Okay, the amendment fails. We are back on to the primary plank without that additional language. Is there further debate or discussion on this primary plank, which would just be a new plank to read? Government policing should be replaced with voluntary peacekeeping, such as by neighborhood watch organizations and private security. Okay, seeing nothing further, we will bring the adoption of whether this shall be the proposal of the committee to a roll call vote whenever you are ready, Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Okay, the next ballot, adopt. This would be to adopt the text of the main motion, Madam Chair?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Gary Alstead,
No.
Paul Grindle,
Aye.
Ted Brown,
No.
Matt Choco,
Aye.
Ken Matz,
Nay.
Josh McCose,
Nay.
Tim McMaster,
Nay.
Omar Rakuro votes nay, Clayton Cashado,
Aye.
and Curry Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Nay.
Okay, I'll put this on the screen for everybody. Okay, we're at ballot number
Did
3.
you-
Madam Chair, we are at 4 in favor, 7 opposed, no express abstentions. Did I miss anyone?
Okay, that proposal has failed. We are moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is proposal 17 from the 2020 report entitled Internal Security and Individual Rights. I will note there was a minority report on that as well, but what we are considering is the committee proposal. If you could pull that up when you have a chance, Mr. Secretary.
Yes. Which one again?
17, Internal Security and Individual Rights.
Okay. I have 17 here. I'm gonna have to get the minority report, but I'll get this on the screen right here. Proposal 17. What was the title to that plank?
I believe it was Internal Security and Individual Rights.
Okay. Where are we here? Put it here. Actually, I'll put it here. Reason being is I want to use this for something else.
And I am going to stick in chat the form that was used that has all the, the fancy color coding and things like that. And chat is what came out of that committee, the form that had been submitted, if that's helpful at all. Now, what makes things difficult here is this proposal has multiple changes all over the place. Unless the committee desires to adopt it in full, which it hadn't really happened on the list, amending each part of it's going to need to be done separately since they are in different separate parts, which we have every right to do. What I think might be useful here, because I've seen us go into the weeds with some of these proposals from the prior report that made numerous extensive changes in multiple parts of the plank. If there isn't an objection from the committee, what I would like to do is have the committee vote on whether to consider this proposal by starting with the changes adopted by 2020, or whether to look at this section anew with our own amendments, if that makes any sense. So what I am asking the committee, we had decided in total to consider every single proposal from the 2020 report. What I am asking is just individually on this one, considering that the changes are scattered, and if we're not happy with it as it is, it will be easier for us to just start with fresh amendments rather than their amendments. So if there's no objection from the committee, I would like us to take a vote first on whether or not we would like to start considering any amendments to this plank with the starting with the amendments that have already been proposed, or whether we would like to start afresh.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Certainly, Mr. Brown.
Okay, so we were debating some of these exact same issues on a prior proposal, and I'm kind of confused because we've considered so many different items, but I
Correct.
remember we were discussing quite a bit on the sentence where it says the Constitution, Bill of Rights shall not be suspended even during times of war.
You are
There were
correct.
proposals about adding other, like pandemic to that part. There were questions with Star Child about, is the Bill of Rights part of the Constitution? We had a major debate about a lot of these items on a previous proposal, and I'm wondering where that stands at the moment.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking at. So you know what, I am going, because we have already extensively changed so much here. I am wondering if the committee would object to us considering this section sufficiently, unless there are new and fresh proposals from the committee, sufficiently considered, and to move past this proposal from the 2020 report, as we have extensively made changes already, and nothing is stopping this committee from proposing new amendments. For instance, I think what we really haven't dealt with already is this part about secret classifications and things like that, where it's starting to talk about private intelligence. I know Mr. Seebeck had a proposal for this, that he is floating discussion on the list. So I'm going to take a chair's prerogative and move a motion. I would like to move that we move past this proposal from the 2020 report, considering it already sufficiently considered, pending any new proposals from this committee, and move on to proposal number 18. I believe I've already spoken in favor of this motion sufficiently. Would anyone else like to speak towards it?
This is Omar.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
As a quick point of information, really, not a point of debate. Madam Chair, your motion sounds like a motion to postpone indefinitely.
It is.
Okay.
In too many words, you made it much more succinct. Is there any objection to postponing this item indefinitely?
Point of information.
Mr. Taylor?
Is there a pending item in the email list serve right now on this, also on this plank? I seem to recall that there is.
I believe there is as well. Mr. Ricuro, is there 2 or 3 pending ballots? And what are the subject matters of those pending ballots?
Okay, so the pending ballots are the minutes from the 220 meeting and 16, proposal 16, amendment 33 international affairs. Those are the 2 pending ballots right now. See ballot 7 and ballot 8 right there on the list.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there any objection to postponing this item indefinitely? Hearing none, we will move to proposal 18 from the 2020 report, which was healthcare. As we start getting into these other ones, I have a feeling the same situation may come up. If you could pull up proposal number 18.
Yep.
And just for the committee's reference, we are getting very close to the end of the 2020 proposals.
That was section, oh, that's a minority report. Hold on.
I see it up on the screen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get something off the screen to work here.
Sure.
Yeah.
18.1. Okay.
Madam
2.1.
Chair, I have a similar question on this plank as I did on the last one there, because we've discussed some of these issues already, and perhaps I know the sentence that's proposed in proposal 18 we haven't discussed specifically, but other parts of this plank we already have discussed. And I'm wondering if we could maybe review that to show where we are on that particular plank.
Are you making this sentence touches an area we have not at all amended? Are you making a motion to postpone, or are you asking the secretary to see where our current language is?
Right, just to see what we've done so far on this particular plank, because I know we've changed the part that is not in blue in this proposal.
Sure.
And so that would sort of show us if that's everything's going to flow the same way if we add this new wording as well.
Mr. Secretary, I have a different suggestion for you. Go back to the agenda. If you pull up the link that says markup copy of the platform.
It's taking its sweet time, but I'm getting there.
It's okay.
Come on. Here we go. Markup language.
Yes, where it says working copy of amended right there.
Yep.
And go to that plank, you'll see the language as it exists now in our proposals. And it is, I don't remember what number healthcare is.
213 or 211, something like that.
It's
Somewhere in
in
the
two.
There we go. Economic liberty. Property contract, energy resource, marketplace freedom.
Right.
Healthcare right there. So
Okay, we have not amended healthcare.
I guess not.
No, we did have those discussions about, I remember these issues being discussed in the part about.
We
about
amended it
having
earlier
obviously-
today. We added that sentence today at
Yes.
the very end of this plank, which obviously is not yet reflected here because we just did it. We added a sentence today. We oppose governments either mandating or restricting voluntary access to medical treatments or procedures, including vaccines. We added that sentence to the end of this plank, but that's the only change that has been made to this plank.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Secretary, if you could go back to proposal 18
Right
from
here.
the 2020.
Yep. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to read.
Okay. And what the proposal had been was to add a new sentence after the first sentence. The first sentence presently reads, we favor a free market healthcare system. The 2020 committee recommended adding this: medical facilities, medical providers, and medical products, quote, open paren, including drugs, close paren, must be freely available in the marketplace without government restrictions or licenses. As life-choking government regulations are lifted, medical costs will come down and quality will improve until even the poorest Americans can once again afford high-quality medical care. That is the amendment that is now on the table.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Kashada.
I'd like to move to divide the two sentences.
Okay, and I believe that is divisible upon the demand of one member. They are not intrinsically related. So we shall consider the first sentence first. So what now is the proposal that we are considering is adding the sentence medical facilities, medical providers, and medical products, including drugs, must be freely available in the marketplace without government restrictions or licensing or licenses, excuse me. Mr. Kashado, did you wish to speak on that?
On the division?
No, the division was automatic upon a demand, but since you had already been recognized, I didn't know if you had any debate on the first sentence.
None at this time. Thank you.
Madam Chair, point of information.
Yes, sir.
Where do you want the thing to be divided? I heard you, but then I lost you.
There's two sentences. We are going to discuss each of the sentences separately. So we are first debating the first sentence, which is that starts with medical facilities and ends with licenses.
That's what I thought. Okay, so I'll leave it like this, maybe.
But we still need, you're going to add the rest of the plank in.
Okay, so like that.
I would just take out the as life choking. Right. I think everyone understands what we are debating at this point. Please let me know if you are not, if you do not. If the committee will permit me limited commentary, I do believe this sentence, and we are allowed to repeat ourselves a million times, but I do believe it repeats what we already just passed earlier today. But we are allowed to repeat ourselves. I just want to make the notation that that first sentence does seem to be repeating some of the concepts we already passed earlier about mandating or restricting voluntary access to medical treatments or procedures. Is there
I
any?
have a point of personal privilege.
Yes, Mr. Casciato,
Could we see that the language we passed?
earlier today,
Yes, yes, please.
Mr. Secretary?
Okay. Do we want, well, I could add it later on to the end. It's right here at the beginning,
If you could highlight that
Thank you.
for Mr. Casciato.
right here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
No problem.
Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak in favor of this first sentence. And it is, I agree, repeating a few of the concepts that we have said that we have passed already today. But what this adds a little bit is the applicability of what we're saying about restrictions and regulations to people who are not individuals, like if in particular facilities, medical providers, businesses, industry, and how they are affected by the issue of healthcare and government regulations. So I think it adds a little bit more with respect to the new sentence that we added today. It could be maybe massaged a little bit, but I think that including those aspects is important, and we should probably pass this sentence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. I saw Mr. McMaster's hand first, and then I had Mr. McMahose. Mr. McMaster?
Yeah, I would also like to speak in favor of this for many of the same reasons that Mr. Taylor spoke on, but I also like the inclusion of or licenses, as I believe as libertarians, we should be vehemently opposed to occupational licensing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMahose.
Are we allowed to speak to both motions, the first and second part?
We are right now only on the first sentence, so please limit to that.
Okay, I would just like to speak in favor of this. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McMaster, did you intend to keep your hand up?
I'm sorry, that's an artifact.
Okay, would anyone else like to, Mr. Alstad?
Oh, thanks. First of all, I think the text here is wrong. This is section 2.13 we're amending, correct? Okay, thank you. And then just briefly, I'm opposed to this. As Madam Chair pointed out, this is repeating what we've said more succinctly elsewhere. And we should not be repeating ourselves unnecessarily. Thank you.
Mr. Alstead, I don't know if you froze for anyone else. Did everyone hear Mr. Alstead?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, it was just for me then. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this?
I would.
Okay, Mr. Secretary.
Sorry, I was trying to get my hand up. You know, before the other language, I think I probably would have preferred this one over the other one. I mean, either or. I guess the other one is a little bit more to the point of a now issue with COVID, right? So I guess to the point that the chair made and Mr. Alverstead made, I guess I'll oppose this because I can see and later on, if anybody wishes to, I could put the last sentence on there so that everyone can kind of get an idea of what the chair is talking about. Like looking at both of them at the same time, I'm going, if we were to add this to the end, as we already did, and adopted both of them, it's double speak. So yeah. But I do appreciate the motion to divide because the next part, well, I'll speak to that when we get there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Would anyone else like to speak to this amendment? Seeing none, when you are ready, Mr. Secretary, we'll bring it to a roll call vote. We will be voting.
Point of information.
Mr. Chalk.
Yeah, can you just state exactly what it is the impact of this vote will be?
Certainly. If a yes vote would adopt as the committee proposal, adding a new second sentence to this plank that would read, medical facilities, medical providers, and medical products, including drugs, must be freely available in the marketplace without government restrictions or licenses.
There's no impact to the stuff we passed earlier.
No, this would be a separate proposal, though the committee later could vote to combine them all into one proposal. But as passed right now, they would be presented separately to the convention.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Yes, Madam Chair. Gary Alvestead.
No.
Let's see here. Paul Grindle,
Aye.
Ted Brown.
Aye.
Okay, Matt Choco,
Aye.
Ken Max,
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Let's see, Tim McMaster.
Aye.
Okay, Omar Referral vote nay. Clayton Casado,
Abstain.
abstain. Curry Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Abstain.
Okay, I will get this on the screen for everybody. Madam Chair, we have, if I didn't miss anyone, 7 in favor, 2 opposed, and 2 expressed abstentions.
Okay, that passes. We will now move to the second part of the divided question, when we'll give the secretary a moment to catch up. And thank you, Mr. Secretary. I know you have a nerve-wracking job.
No, yes, but I've got the hang of it now. So
I
have
just
a
want to
point of
express
information.
my appreciation. Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have so is the first part amendable later on if we get back to a main motion?
It would only be amendable through reconsideration,
Okay.
and you were not on the winning side.
Yep. I know. All righty. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me get.
One thing I will add, though, later, when we are considering how we're going to present these proposals, whether they're going to be presented as separate proposals, whether more towards the final form of our report, it becomes a substantially new question. And you may have an opportunity to amend at that time. I can't say for sure because I'm not sure what our procedural standpoint will be at that time. But I just do want to bring up that when we start moving towards the final report and people may see redundancies, there may be further opportunity to amend. But at this time right now, no. I hope that was clear. Okay, we are now to the second sentence of the divided question, which is to add the sentence immediately after the sentence we just passed. As life choking government regulations are lifted, medical costs will come down and quality will improve until even the poorest Americans can once again afford high quality medical care. I saw Mr. Alvstad had his hand up right away. And then I am not sure between the order, but I believe it was Mr. McHose and then Mr. Casado. Mr. Alvstad.
Thank you. I'm opposed to this. In general, my tendency is to oppose any new language, but I think this is particularly dangerous because it's we're making this kind of consequentialist argument, and it's really not in the voice of the rest of the platform. And if we start adding all this verbiage to lay out the consequences of these actions, I think we could really get a platform that runs away from us and ends up much longer and much less readable than what we have now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Mr. McHose, then Mr. Casado. I'm going to add myself to the list and then Mr. Secretary. Mr. McHose.
I'd like to echo the previous speaker. I'm sorry, I forgot who, the what, but change, new names and all that. So Mr. Alvestad was just previously speaking. And I would just like to, like you said, that the consequentialism to this, it says that the free market will provide a certain thing. There is no guarantee the free market will provide anything. Just to flat out say it. This is just very troublesome. This is not good language. To say that the free market will guarantee low, quality of care, all of the things that are listed. It's just not a good sentence. I'd ask the committee vote this down.
Okay, thank you. I had Mr. Casciato. I am removing myself from the list since the prior speaker said some things I wish to say. And then I had Mr. Ricciaro. Mr. Casciato.
Yes, I'd like to move to strike the phrase starting with until. So it would read, well, I'm moving to strike until even the poorest Americans can once again afford high quality medical care.
Okay. So we have an amendment for a primary amendment, which is to strike until even the poorest Americans can once again afford high quality medical care, so that if the amendment were adopted, the new sentence would simply read, as life-choking government regulations are lifted, medical costs will come down and quality will improve. So now discussion is on the amendment. Mr. Secretary, I had you next. I'm going to let Mr. Casciato speak to his amendment, but so I know where we're at procedurally. Did you want to be kept in line for the amendment after Mr. Casciato speaks to it, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Mr. Casciato, you can speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the previous speakers mentioned that this is consequentialist language. I think that this removes the most egregious part of that. So I think whether or not you support the main this as the main motion, I do believe this is improved language. And you know, I think as libertarians we can agree that if you have regulations, it's going to increase the cost and the quality will be decreased. So I think we could probably all agree on this. To what extent is the question, which is why I want to remove the second part.
Okay, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was actually going to put my hand down because all the points I wanted to make were made already. However, now with this amendment, I'm just going to echo the previous points and say that this doesn't help. The language, all of it, really bad. We're making assumptions and life-choking government regulations. I don't know if that's offensive to anybody, but that just feels like it doesn't belong in a political platform. I think there's a better way. I think in other parts of the platform, we've even just said government regulations or unnecessary government regulation, things of that nature. And again, we're making an assumption: medical costs will come down, quality will improve. There's so many things in that. Just yeah, I'm just not in favor. But I appreciate the effort to strike one part that seemed like it was a bad part, but it's the whole thing that has to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Would anyone like to speak to the amendment striking that last phrasing? Okay, hearing or seeing none, we will move to a vote on this, but there is one thing I would like to just to explain to perhaps some of the newer members of the committee. It is often very common and parliamentary wise to vote for an amendment that improves, if you believe it does improve, an amendment that you eventually intend upon voting down because you do think it will be an improvement, even if an amendment you don't support passes. So I just would like to explain that, because I think some people at times say, I'm against the whole thing, so I'm going to vote against all amendments because I intend upon, no matter how it's perfected, voting it down. The goal in your vote is to always assume that something you oppose will pass and to make it the most palatable to you as possible. I just wanted to explain that because this was a very good example of where that may apply. I'm not saying it does in your particular circumstance. Okay, Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready, we are voting on striking from that second sentence, until even the poorest Americans can once again afford high quality medical care.
Okay, Gary Alstead.
Aye.
Paul Grindle.
Nay.
Ted Brown.
Aye.
Matt Choco. Did we lose Matt?
Sorry, I'll abstain.
Okay.
Abstain.
Ken Matz, thank you.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Nay.
Tim McMaster.
Aye.
Okay. Omar Crow will vote nay. Clayton Casciato.
Aye.
Corey Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay. If I didn't miss anybody, Madam Chair, we have 7 in favor, 3 opposed, 1 express abstention.
Okay, that phrase is struck. We are now back to adding. I'm just going to give the secretary a moment to catch up.
Yeah, 1 second. I always do the things. I'm gonna do this. The mistake I've been making, Madam Chair, is keeping some of this language on screen. I'm gonna delete that sentence so that everyone can see where we are.
Okay. And you will have the recording to go back to for your minutes as well. I know some reason, sometimes I know just as in my my secretarial work, I like to keep it on the screen too, to help with my minutes. So I don't have to review video so much, but it can be confusing to the participants. So now we are on adding, as life choking government regulations are lifted, medical costs will come down and quality will improve. Mr. Secretary, you had been next in the queue when we were on the primary. I believe you spoke. Do you still wish to speak? I don't want to make an assumption.
No, I've made my point clear that I'm in opposition. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, I'd like to speak in opposition also. While we hope this is true, Mr. Alvstad used the term, I forget what term he used, but I thought of the term editorializing a bit. And we hope that the medical costs will come down and quality will improve. But again, there's no guarantee of that. And it is kind of editorializing. I think we're fine without that sentence. I think we can make our point without it. If a candidate wants to mention that as a possibility of what would happen and what he hopes would happen, then that would be perfectly fine.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Would anyone else like to speak to this amendment? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready, we will move to a roll call vote.
Okay. Just want everyone to see what, more or less it would look like if adopted. No. All right. So we're adopting the second division, all right? Okay. Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, I lost my connection there for 1 second. So please repeat.
We're adopting the second part of the revision now.
Yeah, that is what we are voting on, whether or not to adopt that second part. As life choking government regulations are lifted, medical costs will come down and quality will improve. A yes vote will adopt that language, a no vote will reject that language, and we will be moving on to the next item in the agenda.
Okay. Wait, I'm sorry. We're moving to adopt the second part of the language. We would then come back to the main motion as one whole thing.
No, we divided the question.
Right. So if this were to pass, you're saying
This would be added as a separate proposal.
Oh, so this is the whole thing here.
We already added the prior language.
Okay.
Mr. Casciato essentially put this into 2 separate proposals rather than one proposal. So we've adopted that earlier language, which dealt with including drugs. It's not up on the screen, but the first sentence has already been adopted as a proposal of this committee. We are now considering whether to add the second sentence. If we adopt it, it will be a separate proposal. It can be combined later when we decide on how we're going to present our report. But as of right now, it's a separate proposal.
Okay. Gary Elstead.
No.
I lost my cursor. Okay, Paul Grindle. Here we go.
Nay.
That was a nay, right?
Correct.
Okay, Ted Brown.
Nay.
Matt Choco.
Aye.
And Matt's.
Ready to be
Nay.
And Josh McHose.
Nay.
Tim McMaster.
Nay.
Omar Pro votes nay. Clinton Kashado.
Nay.
Okay, Curry Taylor.
Nay.
John Thompson.
Nay.
Okay, got this on the screen for everybody to see. I don't think I missed anyone. I don't think there's any express abstentions. Madam Chair, we have 1 in favor, 10 opposed, and no expressed abstentions.
Okay, thank you. So that has failed, and we have now dealt with that section, which was agenda item F. We are moving on to agenda item G, which was proposal 19, a new plank, intellectual property.
Okay, the intellectual property plank, which would be number 19 right here.
Okay, this was from the 2020 committee to add into section 2, a new plank entitled intellectual property, which would read once. I'm just waiting for the screen to catch up.
Here it is.
No problem, which would add language saying, as we oppose all government intervention in marketplaces, we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws. Disputes between inventors, creators, authors, artists, businesses, and other such entities should be resolved without government intervention. That is now on the floor. Mr. Brown.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what I think about this. This is one of those rare issues where there is no consensus among libertarians. I know there's people on both sides of the intellectual property argument, but I'm kind of questioning the wording here. For example, of course, we oppose all government intervention in the marketplace, but when we're talking about disputes between various parties should be resolved without government intervention. Does that imply that we don't believe in like the civil tort system through government courts and all, which and like how would decisions be enforced if they weren't through the government courts and that factor? Again, this is the same issue that came up with the police departments. And some believe that this is one of the proper functions of government is to provide for civil courts. And in fact, that's what allows business to thrive in some countries where there's a rule of law rather than it just being up in the air and you not knowing what's going to happen. So I don't think I would put this in our platform. And frankly, these parties do currently make deals like this. For example, I'll give it a story. I don't know whether people want to hear a story, but it's a good one. A few years ago, I met the guy that was a songwriter that wrote the song "I Will Survive" back in the 70s, a great song that Gloria Gaynor sung. And this guy was an old guy, about 70, and he had become a rich man driving a fancy car and living in Beverly Hills on that one song. Because every time that's played, even all those years later, like 30 or 40 years after he wrote it, he still gets royalties from that. But that was a deal that he made. And I'm sure that there are all kinds of deals in that regard. But those deals are usually upheld by a civil court system and the rule of law. So I would vote against having this in the platform.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have in this order, somebody let me know if I have it wrong, but since we can't call the question, everyone will get to speak. Mr. Kashado, Mr. Grindle, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. McMaster. And then Mr. Cholko. Mr. Kashado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of people think, well, I guess it's kind of in the name, intellectual property. A lot of libertarians view this as a property right, but it's exactly the opposite. Well, it is a form of property rights, but the whole point of intellectual property is to say what other people can't do with their own property, right? So if you build your new mouse trap that works in a certain way and it snaps the rat in half or whatever, then you're saying that someone else can't obtain these raw materials and put them together in the same way and use that, use that same mechanism and sell it. So you're not protecting your own property, because if you just didn't share it with anybody, then there's nothing to steal. And there obviously are reasons why you would want to keep things to yourself or even share to a limited extent contractually or otherwise. The other big thing with intellectual property is the time limit. So, if you own a house, it's basically presumed that you're going to own that indefinitely. Now, I do agree there are gray areas. If you let the house sit for long enough and you can't tell it's a house anymore and no one's using the property, there's a good argument for the property to go essentially unowned or there to be a new owner. So to be intellectually consistent, I would say your time limit on typical property should be the same for intellectual property, but proponents of intellectual property usually have a time limit for practical purposes, but that indicates that there's something weird about this concept of intellectual property where it's not real property, right? There's not people don't talk about gray areas of time. Like, we're not talking about hundreds of years. We're talking about 10 or 20, which is weird to talk about with property. If you own a house, you don't just own it for 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casciato. I have Mr. Grindle, Mr. Taylor, Mr. McMaster, Mr. Choco, Mr. Ricuro, Mr. Thompson, and then I'm adding myself to the end of that list. Mr. Grindle.
Quick point of information, if I could. Would it be in order to move to divide these two sentences?
It would not be an automatic right. It's always in order to move to divide. There are certain divisions that are automatic if the two concepts are not intrinsically related. And this, I do think it stands or they are intrinsically related. So it is in order to move to divide. It's just not an automatic right. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I added Mr. McHose to the end of the when we get back to the primary, just so that he knows. Would you like to speak to your motion to divide?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So I think that there's these two sentences, although intrinsically linked, I agree with that. They represent different broader concepts. The question of whether we're supporting the repeal of intellectual property is separate from the question of whether we believe all disputes between all those categories of people should never have any sort of government court in any fashion. And so I believe it'd be proper to vote on these two sentences separately rather than together. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask if anyone wishes to speak on the issue of division, just start talking. I don't want to lose the hands from the original motion. Does anyone wish to speak on the motion to divide? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Secretary, if you would bring that to a vote.
Get myself off mute, and we will start with Gary Alvestead.
No.
Okay, Paul Grindle,
Aye.
Ted Brown,
Aye.
Matt Choco.
Abstain.
Okay, Ken Metz
Abstain.
and Josh McHose,
Nay.
Tim McMaster.
Abstain.
Omar Ricuro will vote nay. Let's see, Clayton Casciato
Abstain.
and Terry Taylor,
No.
John Thompson.
No.
Okay, get that on the screen for everybody to see. I don't think I missed anyone. Then there were no express abstentions. Madam Chair, we have.
Wait a minute. There were a bunch of express abstentions.
Oh, wait, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong ballot here. You're right. Thank you, Matt.
Mhm.
I was doing it off screen, that's why. So we have 2 in favor, 5 opposed, and 4 express abstentions.
Okay,
And I don't think-
the division fails, but Mr. Grindle, did you wish to speak on the undivided motion since I still had you at the top of the list?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I think that this motion is something that has been long overdue for the party. There is really not a great libertarian defense of intellectual property. One exists, but it's essentially an invention, like a fiction of the state. And to get us in front of this issue would be a great thing for us. I know in some European countries, there are pirate parties that essentially operate on this issue as one of the primary ones. A lot of success among younger people and people who think they lean more left, but are really unsure of their politics. So it would be great for us to take a principled stand on this where it can benefit us potentially.
Thank you, Mr. Grindle. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I'm generally against this whole proposal, and I do think that there are regions in which there are gray areas in government assignment of rights. For example, if you recognition of rights, I should probably say, if you want to say that that because there is a time limit involved in something that it makes no sense, well, then I would encourage you to think about when someone has the right to do anything, if they are 15 years old, 12 years old, 10 years old, 4 years old. There are clear points in the development of a person's life where you ascribe certain amounts of rights to them. And in the absence of that time or period, then you must give a surrogate to and assign the responsibility to another person or entity. So I don't buy the argument that there's no such thing as a right that has a time limit on it. Now, in individual or intellectual property as a whole, I do agree that the Patent Office needs a lot of reform. As a matter of fact, I strongly would like to see an amendment that we would support some kind of Patent Office reform in particular. And if we think the patents get extended for too long, what was supposed to be 15-year patent gets extended to 30, 40, 50, 60 years. That's terrible. That's completely ridiculous. And then, for example, granting patents to entities or people which are baseless, and have no real innovation or creativity to them, that's ridiculous also. And I would love to see us tackle those points and issues with respect to intellectual property. In the town hall that we had a couple of weeks ago, we also had a speaker who was very much against this, who was an engineer, decorated engineer, and he made some very good points as well, that this is not a good proposal for us to take, and I agreed with most of those points that he had made. So I would like to, if we're going to pass anything at all, I don't think these two sentences are the appropriate ones. I think we should look looking at where we stand on reform of the Patent Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. McMaster, you did have your hand up before I had you on the list. Do you wish to speak?
No, not at this time. Still trying to formulate what I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cholko.
Thank you. So I am in favor of the motion, and I'm going to just kind of speak very generally here. But first, I'll make one specific point, that if we agree that we oppose all government intervention in marketplaces, which I think that most of us do, if we agree with that, then the second part of this sentence isn't really debatable, because intellectual property laws are very clearly government intervention in the marketplace. So I guess you could argue that we don't need to say that part, but I think there's been so much talk in libertarian circles forever about this issue that it makes sense to call it out there. More generally speaking, I touched on this a little bit, I think, in our last meeting, but I've owned a couple small businesses in my life, and I don't own any patents, but I do make use of copyright and trademark law. But I find it pretty offensive, really, this thought that businesses would have trouble if they weren't given this special favor by government. I mean, frankly, I think that's ridiculous. Businesses will adapt to whatever the framework is. And that's evident right now in that businesses adapt to the existing intellectual property framework, where they lobby government to change the laws in their favor all the time. The most glaring example that most of us are familiar with is Disney, which has managed to keep extending their control of Mickey Mouse and other characters for an absurdly long time past the creator's death. But on the other side of that, we see companies that really want to keep their trade secret. They already have a better way, and it's by not telling people. So we've seen that with Coca-Cola. with the Colonel's 11 herbs and spices and many of these other things that, businesses work this stuff out. They do not need a special favor from government to do it. But if government's putting favors out there for the taking, they damn sure are going to try to get them, which is why I don't think that reform is really realistic. I think we just need to get rid of this stuff. If I could wave a magic wand and just roll all the protections back to 5 years or something, I would probably say that's a good compromise. But that's not how it works. If we got everything rolled back to a 5-year timeline tomorrow, the businesses would be there. Disney would be first in line lobbying to change it to 10 to 20 to 50. And it would just end up right back in the same spot it is now. So we just need to get government out of this business and let companies and individuals handle it in whatever way they see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Choco. I have Mr. Ricuro, Mr. Thompson. I had myself in line, and then Mr. McCose. Mr. Ricuro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try something because some of the arguments I wanted to make have been made already. I move to postpone indefinitely.
Please, no.
Okay, that is, I don't believe that's debatable. I think that kind of defeats the purpose, but I'm having a brain fart. 1 second. Let me look and see if that is debatable.
I always forget myself, to be honest with you.
To me, it's postpone and debatable. Yes, and debate can go into the main question. So it is debatable. That surprises me for some reason. I still have in line Mr. Thompson, myself, and Mr. McCose. If everyone could clear their hands, I will keep you guys, if we end up coming back to this main question, in line. Now we will be debating the motion to postpone indefinitely. I will let Mr. Secretary speak to that. Then I have Mr. Casciato, and I also would like to add myself to line, and then Mr. Thompson. So, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just briefly say that I'm reading the digital room, and I think I kind of can see where this is going. So I'm just trying to save us a little bit of meeting time. And again, a lot of points have been made already that I think the general consensus is that we have problems with intellectual property and this particular topic, copyrights and things of that nature, and that maybe there's a better way to say it or a better place to put it in the platform. So let's just move on from this. That's really what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casciato.
The proposal on the floor is not to postpone to the next meeting or 2 meetings from now. It's to postpone indefinitely, which effectively, I could be interpreting this wrong, but effectively, this is the same as voting it down, right? And if you want to do that, that's fine, do that. But I don't know why this is basically trying to end debate and vote it down, which if you want to vote it down, do that, not in this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casciato. I will speak briefly again, trying not to get too much into merits, though if we do get to the main motion, this will be one of the rare times where I do engage in debate. I would just like to remind the committee that if anyone feels that this is a topic that they wish that we discuss, but they don't like this language, that minority reports are always an option. And that's all I wish to say on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, I think we've had a good debate here. I think we can move on this. I would like to add an amendment, but I can discuss that after we dispose of this.
Yes, you are next in line if we get back to the main motion.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Cholko.
You mentioned minority reports, but correct me if I'm wrong here, but if this is postponed indefinitely and we don't have a proposal, then there's not going to be any minority reports included either, because there's not going to be any proposal in which to be a minority on, right?
Correct. I was speaking in opposition to Mr. Secretary saying we should postpone this indefinitely because the language is not the right language. And my point was simply, if people wish to pass this, but would prefer different language, they would have the opportunity of a minority report. If no
Thank you.
proposal is ever passed, there is no minority report. That's only an option if some kind of language is passed. Mr. McCose.
I'd just like to point out, we've seen a lot of debate about this, and that this is one of the heavily debated topics within the party. And trying to make a, just like to say the abortion plank, this would be one of those statements where, we are taking a stance on it, when there are people within the party who heavily feel differently. I may agree with the sentiments, but within this plank, but there are a lot of people which, like I'm saying, it's heavily, I'm not sure where, people stand. I'm sure if we took this up, we all passed this would, and then we proposed it to the delegates, it would tell us where our party stands at this current time. So you can vote however you feel. I will be voting against this.
Thank you, Mr. McCose. Seeing no further debate on the motion to postpone indefinitely, Mr. Secretary, we will take a roll call vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely.
Point of
Yes.
information.
Yes?
Is it not true, Madam Chair, that if this motion were to pass and then we did not accept this wording as it is now, someone could propose in the email list a new plank on intellectual property with different wording altogether?
They could.
Thank you.
Okay. I lost my ticker here. Gary Alstead.
Aye.
What happened here? Okay. Okay.
And to
Paul
be
Grant-
clear, we are voting on the motion to postpone indefinitely. I just wanted to reiterate. Thank you.
Appreciate the
Paul Grindle from
reiteration.
New York.
Nay.
Okay. Ted Brown.
Aye.
Okay. Matt Choco.
Nay.
Ken Matz.
Aye.
Josh McCose.
Aye.
Tim McMaster.
Abstain.
Okay. Omar Recurl votes aye. Clayton Cachado.
Nay.
Okay. Kerry Taylor.
Aye.
John Thompson.
Nay.
Okay. This is a close one, Madam Chair. Ballot number 8. Did I miss anyone? There's one express abstention. Okay, it is 6 in favor, 4 opposed, 1 express abstention.
Okay, this item is then postponed indefinitely, and we will move to the next item on the agenda. Just for information to elaborate on what Mr. Taylor had brought up before, this does not stop somebody from even revisiting this language later. This just means it's not going to automatically come up again, but it can be renewed, the same language at a later date or completely different language. But as of right now, it is not scheduled to come up again automatically. All right, we are moving on to agenda item H, which is proposal number 20, self-determination.
Okay. We are moving right along here, Madam Chair. Proposal 20, right?
Yes.
Self-determination, plank 3 point. Self-determination.
I can look that up. I should have put that in the agenda. That is a fault on my part.
Yeah, me
One-
too.
It is 3.7.
It was a point that Star Child brought up and he's correct. We should have the titles and everything. Yeah, so. Okay.
Okay, so this proposal is to add a new sentence to the end of the self-determination plank 3.7. actually 2 new sentences, which would read, we recognize the right to political secession. Exercise of this right, like the exercise of all other rights, does not remove legal and moral obligations not to violate the rights of others. So debate and discussion is now on this plank. I see Mr. Brown, and I am going to add myself in line as well. Mr. Brown.
Yes, I want to propose an amendment to the end of the plank, which would say, those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission from those from whom they wish to secede. And I put that in chat. That is wording from the California platform, which is, of course, the whole platform has been eliminated, but that was in the secession plank of the California platform. I had proposed that many years ago, and it was adopted. This happened after a part of the city of Los Angeles, the San Fernando Valley, voted to secede from the city of Los Angeles, but it also required the rest of the city to agree as well, and they did not. So frankly, those who wish to secede should say, yep, we're going. And and they shouldn't have to get permission from anyone else to do so. So I think that's important to add to the end, or else the right of secession is rather limited.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. So right now, debate is on adding that additional sentence. I will save my spot in line to after this amendment is disposed of. Would anyone like to speak to this amendment? Mr. Thompson.
I support the language. I think it is important to say that the rights of the minority are not dependent upon the will of the majority. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cholko.
I'm kind of neutral on the amendment. I think, you know, when we recognize the right to political secession, I feel like we're already saying that you know, if you want to leave, you get to leave, and it's not up to the body from which you're leaving. I don't think this language is bad, except that if we're going to start saying who you don't have to get permission from, I mean, what about the state of California in that previous example? Should part of LA need the permission from the state of California to leave the other part of LA? What about the United States government? So you know, I don't know that I like spelling out specific entities that we don't need permission from, because we don't need permission from anybody. I mean, I think that's our position. So, you know, I'm not sure if I'm in favor or against, but I don't think it's the best language.
Thank you, Mr. Cholko. Mr. Thompson.
I already spoke. Sorry, I should have my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCose.
I'd like, is it in order to amend this or making it an additional amendment to the amendment?
As long as it's relevant, yes.
I'd like to strike from those from whom, like the last sentence, just the last few words, from those from whom they wish to secede. So it would just say those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission, period.
Okay, that is a relevant amendment. So we are now on the amendment. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. McCose?
No, I think it speaks to itself.
Okay, Mr. Cholko.
Yeah, I mean, that takes care of my concern, so I support this amendment.
Okay, would
Madam
anyone else?
Chair?
Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, just the last 2 words, which one?
No, put a period after permission.
Permission. There we go. Right. Give me a second to get it up better.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak to this secondary amendment? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, we will move to a roll call vote on striking from the primary amendment. The primary amendment originally read, those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission from those from from those from whom they wish to secede, and this would strike out the last phrase, from those from whom they wish to secede, so that the sentence, if this passes, would simply read, those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. Whenever you are ready, Mr. Secretary.
Okay, I gotta make an adjustment here.
And I'm recognizing in chat, after this, Mr. Casciato had asked to be next to speak after we dispose of this.
Okay. Gary Alsett.
Nay.
Okay, Paul Grindle,
Nay.
Ted Brown,
Nay.
Matt Choco,
Aye.
Ken Max,
Aye.
Josh McHose,
Aye.
and McMaster.
Aye.
Omar Rocuro will vote aye. Clayton Casciato,
Aye.
Kerry Taylor,
Abstain.
and John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay, give me 1 second, everyone, as I have to switch sheets here. Switch the page. I'm on number 10, number 9. Okay, did I miss anyone? Madam Chair, I have 7 in favor, 3 opposed, 1 express abstention.
Okay, that last portion is struck. We are now back to the primary amendment. I'll just wait for you when you have a moment to switch screens, and Mr. Casciato wished to be first in line.
I do, but it'll be irrelevant if Mr. Taylor makes his. Are you going to make that motion, Mr. Taylor?
No, I did not plan to. Go ahead if you wanted to.
Okay, I'll just make my original motion then, and I am open to that. I'd like to swap the ultimate and penultimate sentences, please. That's my motion.
Okay, could you say that in simpler English?
Yes, the sentence starting with exercise of this right, I'd like to move to the end.
Okay, so please state fully, because I'm not understanding.
The last part.
Oh, okay, I see. So what you're saying is you would like to amend. Okay, that's not in order at this time, because you are going beyond, we are on those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. If that gets adopted, then your motion would be in order, but we are limited right now to debate and discussion of those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you will be, when we get back to the main motion, I had already put myself in line for that, so you will be second on that to make that motion. Would anyone else like to speak simply on the primary amendment of those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, we will take a roll call vote on that amendment.
The secede part, right, in blue?
Yes. We are voting on whether or not to add those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission.
Okay. Gary Alsett,
Can you pass me for now?
sure. Paul Grindle,
Nay.
Ted Brown,
Aye.
Matt Choco,
Aye.
and Ken Max,
No.
Aye.
Josh McHose,
Aye.
Tim McMaster,
Aye.
I am going to, Omar Crow is going to pass as well. Still thinking. Clayton Cachado,
Aye.
Curry Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay, coming back to Gary Alstead.
Yeah, I'm going to vote in the affirmative. Aye.
Alrighty, I'm gonna mark you as an aye. Come on. There it is. And Omar Crow will abstain. There we go. And Madam Chair, I show, if I didn't miss anyone, 9 in favor, 1 nay vote, and 1 express abstention.
Okay, thank you. So that passes. I'll just wait for you to be able to switch screens.
Yeah.
So if you could now put in blue the entire, all 3 sentences, which is, we recognize the right to political secession. Exercise of this right, like the exercise of all other rights, does not remove legal and moral obligations not to violate the rights of others. Those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. That is what we are considering as the committee proposal at this time. So we are back at the top level. And I had put myself in line to speak once we got to this point. I'm just going to speak very briefly. A lot of states are adding this plank. So I do believe there is a lot of support in the party for this concept. Colorado added this several years ago, I believe, as did Florida. And Florida just passed a resolution to this effect. I realize that there's not unanimity. I never can pronounce that word on a lot of our planks, but I do think there's a ground well of support for this. I am not going to make this amendment, but I realize that the word secession can carry a lot of baggage, that some opposition to this idea is more opposition to the word secession rather than the concept itself. And if anyone on this committee has that kind of hitch in their spirit, which I would understand, that in Colorado, instead of using the word secession, we used the right to political self-determination. And then went and use that instead to avoid bringing up images of some unpleasant American history. That is all I wish to say. Mr. Cachado, I wanted to be recognized to make an amendment, and then I had Mr. Choco, who may not wish to be next after Mr. Cachado makes his motion, but we shall see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the latest added sentence. I'd like to swap the last and second to last sentences.
Okay, give me 1 second because I saved the text of it. So just give me 1 second.
Okay.
So what Mr. Cachado is proposing, I have to wait now. You keep disorientating me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's perfectly okay.
Okay,
So
this is what I think
if
he
I-
wants to do.
Yes, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So Mr. Cachado is seeking to move that last sentence to right after we recognize the right to political secession, so that it would read, we recognize the right to political secession. Those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. Exercise of this right, like the exercise of all other rights, does not remove legal and moral obligations not to violate the rights of others. Discussion right now is limited to whether or not to move that sentence. Mr. Choco, do you wish to just remain on deck for the primary when we get back to the top level, or do you wish to speak on this as well?
Well, I want to speak on both real quickly. I'll just say I think this is a good improvement that improves readability and doesn't change the intent here. So I support this change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Choco. And I have you at the next when we're back to the top level. Would anyone else like to speak?
Madam Chair.
Oh, Mr. Cachado, please speak to your amendment.
Thank you. The reason I want to move this sentence is because it's describing the right, and I suppose you could call this a caveat, but it's the the exercise of this right, like the exercise of all other rights, does not remove legal. That's like a strong caveat. Like that's not saying the opposite, but it's a stronger caveat than the obtaining permission. So I think it makes logical sense to describe the right and then describe the caveat, because otherwise you're going back and forth. You're saying here's the right, here's a caveat, and then here's more of the same right. So that's why I wanted to change the order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw Matt Choco's hand.
Mr. Choco is leaving his hand up to speak to, when we get back to the top level.
Okay. I just had a point of information. I was just going to get in line. What time are we scheduled to, Madam Chair? 5 or 6? I say 5 Eastern.
It's 3 to 6 Eastern. It's a 3-hour meetings when it's Sunday. It's 2-hour meetings when it's Thursday.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure of that. Thank you.
Okay, if no one else wishes to speak, we will move to a roll call vote on swapping those 2 sentences.
Okay.
Point of information, if I could quickly.
Certainly.
When you say swapping those 2 sentences, you mean replacing the 2 blue sentences in 19 with the blue sentence in 20, correct?
Well, we had added to the end, those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. Swapping's the wrong word. He wishes to move that up a sentence so that it would, instead of being at the end, it would be the second sentence.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, we ready, Madam Chair?
Yes, we are.
Gary Alstead.
Aye.
Okay, Paul Grindle.
Aye.
Ted Brown.
Aye.
Matt Choco.
Aye.
Ken Matz.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Tim McMaster.
Aye.
Omar Curl votes aye. Wait for Shadow.
Aye.
And Curry Taylor.
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay, Madam Chair, we are all ayes here, 11 in favor.
I should have asked if
And-
there was an objection. That is.
Yeah, I meant to ask as a point of information to try that method first to see. It's all good.
Yeah, that so rarely happens on platform that that was my mistake. Okay, so that has passed. So we are now back at the top level. I have Mr. Cholko, Mr. Brungart, and Mr. Alvstead. Mr. Cholko.
Okay, you, Madam Chair, you put out the language self-determination rather than secession, right? That is the language you mentioned?
That is the language I had mentioned that
Okay,
ended up passing Colorado. Yes.
All right, I want to go ahead and move that amendment now that we change the word secession to self-determination. And I'll speak to that whenever you're ready for me to do so.
I am ready.
Okay, so to be completely frank, I think there's a possibility that I may vote against my own amendment here, but I'd like to hear discussion. I agree that the word secession is touchy sometimes because it has a history in this country that's in some people's minds not a very flattering one. So if the words if self-determination is better than secession in the minds of the members of the committee, then I support it, and I'm just kind of interested in seeing what everybody thinks.
Thank you, Mr. Choco. So you are moving to strike in the first sentence the word secession and insert the phrase or the word hyphenated word self-determination.
Correct.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Casciato.
The second sentence also contains the word secede. Thank you.
Mr. Choco, does that affect your motion at all?
Yeah, maybe it does. Is it okay for me to take my motion off the floor while I think about it a little more?
Because there are no seconds, I don't view it the same as a regular thing. I don't believe it yet belongs to the body until it's been formally stated. Unless somebody objects, I'm going to allow you to do that because anyone else could just immediately turn and move it anyway. So does that what you wish to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to pull it off. I want to think about and see if maybe somebody else has a better solution.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Toko. Mr. Broomgard?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to just say that everything that I'm going to vote on for this proposal will be based on feedback that I've received from my constituents. We've discussed it in detail within the state of Michigan. So I won't take any personal stances on this, even though I wholeheartedly believe in the right to secession and don't personally mind that word. However, many folks in my state have expressed concerns about use of the word secession to me, enough so that I believe I must vote against any proposal that would use that terminology. The terminology that we liked the most among our state was withdrawal. If you look up the definition of secession, of secede or secession, it has the same meaning. It uses the word withdrawal. So as far as communication-wise, it should have the exact same meaning. It's not opposing that. I'm just putting that out as a point of discussion. And if somebody else wants to make a motion to amend this wording and use that language or any other language, then I would gladly support this without the word succeed in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brungart. I have Mr. Alvstead, Mr. Taylor, and I have added myself.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Brungart didn't make we're still on the main motion, right?
Yes, we are, Mr. Toko.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to strike the last sentence.
Okay, so you would like to remove the sentence, exercise of this right, like the exercise of all other rights, does not remove legal and moral obligations not to violate the rights of others.
Correct.
Okay, would you like to speak to that?
Yes. Again, I feel that this concept that one person's rights doesn't, is always limited by their effect of other people's rights is a basic concept. We don't need to state it every time we state that you have the right to do X, that you're limited by this. It should either expressly be in our statement of principles or in some kind of overriding amendment, but it's not something that needs to be constantly restated every time we bring up any individual instance of a right. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alvstead. Mr. Taylor, I had you as next, but did you wish to just remain first when we get back to the primary, or did you wish to speak at this time as well?
I was actually wanting to speak on the terminology used, but I don't think it's appropriate since we just had another motion, so I'll come back.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to speak to the striking of this last sentence? Okay, I would like to add just one editorial comment. It's more information. It's not debate. We do earlier state in our platform that no individual, group, or government has the right to initiate force, I believe is the language, against any other individual, group, or something to that effect. So there is an overarching statement, like Mr. Alvstead said, that our platform should have. That is a guiding principle. Whether or not the committee thinks that's sufficient to cover this area is to the committee's determination. I just wish to offer that for the committee's information. Okay, if there is no further debate on striking this last sentence, Mr. Secretary, when you are ready, we shall take, wait, is there an objection to striking this sentence?
I object.
Mr. Secretary, please call the roll when you have a moment, when you can. Not when you have a moment. That could be 10 hours from now, when you are ready.
Yeah, no.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Brungart?
Madam Chair, I'd like to be added to the voting. I called in late. I'd like to be added to the voting. Thank you.
Right. That's actually what I've been doing, is getting your name on the sheet, Mr. Brungard. Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right, so we will start with Gary Alvstead.
Aye.
Aye. Paul Grindle,
Aye.
Ed Brown.
Abstain.
Okay, Joe Brungart,
Aye.
Matt Choco,
Abstain.
Ken Matz,
Aye.
Josh McColes.
Nay.
Okay, Tim McMaster,
Nay.
Omar Pearl will vote aye. Clayton Cachado,
Aye.
Kerry Taylor,
I will abstain.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay, let me see if I got the right sheet here. Number 13, right, this is an amendment. Madam Chair, I show 7 in favor, 2 oppose, 3 express abstentions, if I didn't miss anyone.
Okay, thank you. That sentence is now struck. I'll give you a moment to get back to that screen. And I had Mr. Taylor up and then myself.
So I'm not afraid of the word secession. It's not just an American word. It's not just a United States word. It's a global word. It's in the dictionary. It has an objective meaning. It has a political meaning. The problem that I have is not, well, we could come up with another term other than secession. If we didn't want to use that word, I don't have a problem with it. However, the term that was proposed earlier was political self-determination, I think, which I think is not a good phrase to use. And the reason is because that, democracy could be construed to mean a form of political self-determination. And I don't think it's clear enough of a term to say what we really mean. I think the term withdrawal was better. Maybe there's an even better term than that out there, but I just can't support political self-determination. I'm fine with secession again, but if someone had a different proposal.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor, I actually was going to speak in favor of self-determination and you changed my mind, I believe. I would recommend that if we're getting to a point where we're at some sort of agreement and there might be an issue with terminology, that interested members get together perhaps to form a minority report with the same concept but different terminology, because it seems like we are starting to debate in circles a little bit. I have Mr. Grindle and Mr. Broomgart.
Thank you. I think that self-determination works as a phrase because actually exactly what Mr. Taylor said. It could refer to if a locality wishes to have democracy. It could refer to anarchy. It can refer to removing territory. It is up to the locality to make that decision. I think that it complies with the spirit of the Dallas Accord, and it also allows us to use language that is more commonly used internationally when dealing with questions of political self-determination. And whether an area such as, say, like a Hong Kong or something has the right to separate out from mainland China. The term that they often will use is self-determination. So if it allows us to avoid the unnecessary negative connotations that the word secede has and gives us a broader reach, I see no reason why not to do it.
Madam Chair, a point of information.
Yes, Mr. Chalco?
Am I correct that there is no self-determination amendment on the floor, right?
There is not, but it is in order to discuss the potential of it because we are debating the merits of the word secession. So I do think
Sure. I just want to make sure that somebody else didn't make that amendment and I missed it.
No, sir. Okay, Mr. Broomgart, then I have Mr. Secretary. You are muted, Mr. Broomgart.
Thank you. Okay. Move to replace the word in the sentence, we recognize the right to political secession with, I want to replace the word secession with withdrawal. And in the sentence following that, replace the word secede with withdraw.
Okay, so from what I understand, you are seeking to strike the word secession in the first sentence and insert withdrawal. And in the second sentence, striking the word secede and inserting the word withdraw.
Correct, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, did you wish to speak to that or stay for when we end up back on a main thing? And I'm going to let you speak to your amendment in one moment. I just want to see what Mr. Rakiro's desires were.
I'll bring me back to the main motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Brungart, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I'd basically just reiterate what I just said a minute ago. My state has told me that they don't want the word secession or secede in anything in the plank. So I think that this is a way that I can alter the wording of this and support it, and not have to answer back to them with, why I didn't listen to them. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Cholko.
Thank you. So while I sympathize with the need to change it to satisfy Michigan party members, and I think that's important, and I appreciate that the representative is doing that job well, I don't think I can support this change because it takes the plank from something that's pretty easily understood with very, words that we're familiar with, used in a familiar context, to a word that I don't feel like that's very political. Withdrawal is just not a common terminology, and I think it just makes it kind of weird. So I don't like that. I don't want to say it's confusing, but it kind of muddies the waters a little bit to me. So I think that I am opposed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cholko. Mr. Brown, Mr. Grindle.
Okay, basically political withdrawal. I don't think anyone would associate that with secession, like of a city from or a part of a city from a city, or a city from a county, or something like that. A political withdrawal to me is like when a candidate leaves the race or something, like he withdraws from a political race. Political withdrawal. I don't think anyone would associate that with secession. So I think we should leave secession.
Okay, and Mr. Secretary, please note that Janae LeBlanc has come to the meeting. And I believe who was next? Mr. Grindle.
Thank you. I second Mr. Brown's comments on the use of the language withdrawal. That's pretty much what I would assume if I read that. I think most people would assume it's referring to something along those lines. I 100% agree with the earlier people who were concerned about the language of secession. I think, as I said before, self-determination is a much better phrase, but withdrawal is a confusing phrase and a little bit of like a dodge of what we're trying to do. So I would not support the language withdrawal.
Okay, I have Mr. Secretary, and then I was going to add myself, and then Mr. Actually, no, I am getting myself confused. Mr. Broomgard, Mr. Secretary wanted to be on the primary. Mr. Broomgard.
Yeah, I actually agree with everybody's comments, and if there's no objection, I'd like to revoke my.
You would like to withdraw withdrawal?
I would like to withdraw my motion to amend, yes.
Is there any objection to Mr. Broomgart withdrawing his amendments of withdrawals? Hearing no objection, we are back to the original language. Then I had Mr. Secretary, and I would add myself.
Okay. Do I have the floor, Madam Chair?
You do.
Thank you. So, I'm just copying and pasting here.
Yep.
It was mentioned before that, somebody had mentioned before, that they are cautious about new text being added to the platform. That's one of my kind of underlying rules I came here with no agenda other than to help strengthen the platform and help us, gather a better consensus when we have these things. This was adopted on an 8-7 vote last term. So we've been debating this for a while now, and it just goes to show you that even last term, even though we've amended this and changed it a little bit, we had a lot of debate on it last term, and this is a new committee, and we're still having a lot of debate on it. So I don't think we're there yet, no matter which way we go. I'm not sure if this is going to pass or fail, but I'm rising in opposition to it because I think the plank is fine as it is. And for me, one of my underlying rules is, I'm a little hesitant when it comes to new language. And does it make the platform that much better? Is it going to help the party? Is it going to help our candidates? Is it something that we've been missing for a while? Does it fill a gap somewhere? Things of that nature. And I'm just not seeing it. We keep going back and forth with the secession word and this and that. And I just don't think, Madam Chair, I think you even made the point that it's different states have different reasons for why they're doing this or not doing it. So I'm not moving anything. I'm just saying that after all the debate, I'm not in support. Thank you.
Thank you. I have myself and then Mr. Choco. I am actually going to make a rare motion. Everyone keeps, there's been good points, I think, made back and forth on self-determination. And I do think we need to make a decision between these two words. So I am actually going to move a substitute. Mr. Secretary, I know you love those. And the substitute would read, we recognize the right to political self-determination without having to obtain the permission of others.
Madam Chair, you said obtain the rights from others, right?
Obtain the permission of others.
The permission of others. And where would this go?
This is a substitute. So instead of those two sentences, so we have both of them are now live, meaning if anyone, we perfect them both, and then we decide which of the two will become the primary motion. And I'd like to speak to my substitute. I also personally do not have a problem with the word secession, but I recognize the sensitivities that can cause. I also recognize that the Colorado solution of simply using self-determination after the addition of Mr. Brown's amendment of those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission, added the word secede again. I think combining these two concepts into one sentence, just using the word self-determination once, could potentially solve the sensitivity issue to that word. If it comes down to a tie on either of them, I really do not know which way I would vote. I just wish to move the discussion along and provide a viable alternative. So where we are at procedurally right now is I am going to ask if anyone wishes to speak to or amend the primary first, which is the right to recognize the right to political secession. Those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. Once we are done debating and amending that, we will then move to the substitute. Mr. Cholko.
Madam Chair, point of order real quick.
Yes.
And I hate to be that guy. If you're moving a substitute, when we get to the substitute, do you have to pass the gavel?
No, as the committee chair, I actually have the right to vote, make motions, and committee chairs don't have the same restrictions that regular chairs do. I just voluntarily choose 98% of the time never to exercise those rights.
Understood.
I usually only do so when I think we're reaching a stalemate and trying to move us in a more productive direction. Mr. Choco, do you wish to speak to or?
So I do wish to speak to the primary, but I have a point of, or a question first.
Okay.
Is it in order, not, will it be in order when we get there to amend the substitute? It will be, right?
Yes, it will be, but only one level of amendment will be allowed.
Okay, thank you. So now on the primary, and this sort of extends to both of them, really. So this is the one of only two issues where Libertarian Party of Virginia members asked me to bring forth a proposal on this subject. I have been asked to work on a secession plank. It was proposed to be a separate plank, but I think this is doing the job here. So the point is that I need something to come of this discussion. And you know, this is a popular issue. I think we need to get something out of this committee on this matter. So let's pass something rather than getting fed up with the discussion and postponing it indefinitely and you know, just kicking the can down the road. So I like the first one. We got specifically the primary. It specifically says the stuff that I've been asked to work on, but I think, you know, that's all. I'm speaking only to the primary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCose. And Mr. Choco, I do have you first when we get to the substitute.
Thanks.
I was just gonna add that this topic is of local importance and like national, like there are communities, jurisdictions all trying to secede everywhere across the nation right now. Be it just, you know, cities trying to secede from municipalities, or, you know, certain jurisdictions of one state trying to split off from another. So this is a very important topic is all I was going to add.
Thank you, Mr. McCose. Mr. Mercuro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just briefly say to counter a point that was made earlier that I guess I might make this argument on both the substitute and the main. We don't have to pass anything if it doesn't make the platform that much better. And that's all I'll say.
Mr. Taylor?
I have an amendment to the substitute when we get to it.
Okay, I'll put you after Mr. Choco. Just be aware, Mr. Choco also has an amendment if you wanted to confer with him in chat to see if it was the same, just curious. Would anyone else like to speak to the primary? Okay, we are now moving on to the substitute. Mr. Choco.
Is there anybody else that wants to speak to it? I'd rather talk to Curry first before I eat up a bunch of the committee's time with a bad motion.
Well, what you can do, Choco, without moving it is say what are you thinking of amending? And then maybe Mr. Taylor can say something in chat to you.
Okay, give me just a second here.
Okay, Mr. Curry put into chat that he wanted to add self-determination of jurisdictions.
Yeah, that's substantially different than what I was thinking about.
Okay, go ahead then, Mr. Cholko. And I added you, Mr. Kishado.
So actually, I don't think my language is ready, and I don't want to kill the secretary, so I'm going to do nothing at the moment.
And I'm sure Mr. Ricuro thanks you. I have Mr. Taylor, then Mr. Kishado, and then Mr. Alvstead. Mr. Taylor.
Okay, my objection originally to self-determination is the fact that it can be construed to be just about anything. I'm sure the United States government, when they're up, in the Congress, are thinking about how they're running the government, they say they're they determine things pretty independently and with self-determination, and I think democracy could be thought of as self-determined. I mean, everybody who works in government, I imagine, is probably thinking that they're, doing things in a free, self-determined sort of way. And so in order to kind of preserve the meaning of the secession word, if we're going to use this as a substitute, we need to say that we're talking about something geographic. We're talking about a geographic change in their political methods of how that they are running the show. So my attempt to do that is to amend to say political self-determination of jurisdictions, meaning that would be, we're talking about the geographic region that is attempting to change how they are self-governed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Casciato, did you wish to speak on Mr. Taylor's amendment, or were you waiting till we got back to the substitute?
I had a motion for the substitute.
Okay, I will keep you in line there. Mr. Alvstead, same question.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, no, I was going to speak on the substitute. I guess I want to see what this amendment is. I'm not really clear what Mr. Taylor has amended
Okay.
or moved. Yeah.
After the words political self-determination in the substitute, he wished to add the words of jurisdictions. So it would read, we recognize the right to political self-determination of jurisdictions without having to obtain the permission of others.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I guess my problem with, you know what, I'll speak later on the substitute on the main.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak further on the amendment to the substitute? Mr. Casciato.
Yes, sorry if I missed it, but could someone explain why we're adding this and what this fundamentally changes?
Mr.
Thanks.
Taylor.
Okay, I'm going to repeat what I'm trying to do here. To me, the word secession is more objective in its meaning. I'm trying to translate that objective meaning to this substitute, meaning that what we're specifically saying is that a region of a country or a province or whatever you want is trying to determine their political way of governing, right? They're trying to make their own self-determination of how they govern in that particular region. Political self-determination just alone, to me, can mean just about anything. And it could mean the way the United States is run today. So I think we need to be more specific if we're going to try to pass something that's not the word secession.
Mr. Grindle.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure that that's how people would read political self-determination. That would be people in Congress feeling like they're self-determined with how they're voting. It has a pretty clear definition. But that said, adding the language of jurisdictions definitely clarifies it for sure. It makes it very precise exactly what type of self-determination we're talking about. So it would not be a bad amendment at all.
Mr. Casciato.
Yes. So I kind of worry, like, for those who believe in secession, those who take it to its logical conclusion, would say secession all the way down to the individual. So because you don't say something doesn't mean you're saying the opposite. But as to one of the previous speakers, it is very specific. So it may exclude, like, by putting in these words, it may exclude individuals or lower whatever a non-jurisdiction is. So, thanks.
And oh Lordy, I think Choco might be proposing a substitute to a substitute, which will be fun. Okay, anyone else like to speak to of jurisdictions? Is there an objection to adding to the substitute the amendment of jurisdictions?
I object.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, when you are ready, please do a roll call vote. And what we would be voting on is amending the substitute to add the word of jurisdictions after the phrase political self-determination, so that the sentence would read, if passed, we recognize the right to political self-determination of jurisdictions without having to obtain the permission of others.
Okay, Gary Elfstead,
Abstain.
Paul Grindle,
Abstain.
Ted Brown,
Aye.
Joe Brunhart, I see Joe on the phone, but I don't see the little icon. Come back to him. Matt Choco,
Abstain. I think that was Joe also abstaining at the same time.
yes. Okay.
It was. Thank you. I couldn't find mute.
Thank you, guys. Ken Matz.
I will vote aye.
Okay, Josh McHose,
Nay.
Tim McMaster.
Aye.
I'm gonna pass for the moment. Omar Curl will pass. Clayton Cachado,
Nay.
Curry Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Nay.
That was a nay.
Nay, yeah, nay.
Okay, let me get that on the screen. I hope I have the right sheet here. Yeah, number 14. All right. Who did I pass? I passed myself and anybody else. Let's see. I will vote nay. Madam Chair, we are 4-4 with 4 express abstentions. Wow.
Did we lose quorum?
No, that's 12 votes right now.
Oh, okay, I missed 6. Oh, so it's tied.
Yes.
I am not going to vote.
Okay. Just so everyone understands, the counter here counts automatically when I hit an X. And so like that number right there always tells me what quorum is. So as long as it's above 10, we have quorum.
Okay, at a tie, it does not pass. We are back to the substitute. What I would say to Mr. Taylor is if the substitute passes as the main emotion, I would highly encourage you to propose that as a minority report. I think that would be an excellent minority report. Mr. Cachado.
Thank
we're
you, Madam
back.
Chair.
Okay, and just so I'm going to say who I have in line, I have Mr. Cachado, Mr. Alvstad, Mr. Cholko, Mr. Brungart.
Okay, so this may sound silly. Well, here, I'd like to make what I believe is a substantive change of adding a comma before without.
Can we do that? It is a okay, you're allowed to do that. I just really wish we wouldn't debate commas. Okay.
Where's the comma, Madam Chair?
After
Before
jurisdiction. I mean, excuse me. Before without. Can you speak to how you think that's a substantive change? Because I want to be honest with you, I don't think it is, and I think it's grammatically incorrect. But I would like to hear your argument.
So I understand commas like this are normally not substantive. I can't explain it that well, but I don't feel I feel that comma does make the second part its own clause. And I don't think they're intrinsically tied. So I'm sorry, I can't describe this very well. I do think to me, this feels like a substantive change, even though I recognize this normally isn't.
Okay. The persons I've had who have their hands raised now, do any of you wish to speak to this particular issue? No, okay. One thing I would like to say to Mr. Cachado, you have every right to make the amendment. I I'm going to warn you what I think will happen if this passes is a future secretary of the LNC is going to remove that comma as being grammatically incorrect and undo it. I do not see a substantive change. You have every right to make it. I could just tell you as a secretary in the past, and of course, everyone knows my position on that right now. That's what I would have done the last time I did a pass through the platform. I would have removed that comma. And I would encourage you perhaps to think of a way to make it more obvious, but you have every right to make this.
Thank you, Madam
Point of
Chair.
information,
Mr. Choka.
Is this shown on the screen? Because I don't think I'm seeing it.
Because it's just a comma, it is, it's blue, but it's so tiny.
But is of jurisdictions?
That's gone.
That's gone, okay.
The amendment on the floor right now is to add a comma after the word self-determination.
Thank you.
Mr. Brungar, oh no, everyone else was from before. I am going to object to this, so will require a vote. Apologies, Mr. Secretary. Would anyone else like to speak to this?
Madam Chair, this is Omar.
Yes.
I'm going to inquire, I guess, as a point of information, since you are objecting.
Yes.
Where or why is it incorrect?
There's just, I mean, I could pull out my Chicago Manual of Style, but I doubt people really want me to do that right now. You'll probably hate me more than pulling out Roberts, but a comma is not required before the word without. It's just our style guide is the Chicago Manual of Style, which I've either had the pleasure or displeasure of having to learn very well during my terms as secretary. And it's not, I forget the grammatical term, but it's not a dependent clause.
Okay, I'm not a Chicago style expert, so that's why I asked. All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Casciato.
A point of information. Does the Chicago Manual of Style, does it just say this is not necessary, or is it incorrect?
I would have to go pull it out, and I don't have it right here in the room. If the committee wishes to take a 5-minute recess, I could go downstairs and get the Chicago Manual of Style. I'm going to say an editorial comment here. I think we will start to lose the committee's attention rapidly when we're arguing about commas. But if someone would like to move for a 5-minute recess so that the chair can go get her copy of the Chicago Manual of Style, I will entertain such a motion.
Madam Chair, the last motion we had to extend didn't end well. So I would ask the committee, let's go to vote.
Mr. Choco? Oh, no, never mind. You're on.
No, I'm up for, I forgot even what.
Yeah, I know where you're at.
I just want to clarify something here.
Yes.
So the LNC secretary is empowered to go through and make grammatical changes, correct?
In conformity with the Chicago Manual of Style, and the LNC has to approve it.
So theoretically, if we thought that this comma was important, it could just get removed anyway, right? It doesn't really matter what we do here. I mean, I guess it increases the chances of having a comma there if we vote to put it in, but it's still subject to removal by the secretary and LNC.
I would think it would be, from my experience, because Mr. Casciato hasn't been able to articulate why he believes this is a substantive change. Without that articulation, as committee chair presenting this proposal, if it passes, I'm not going to be able to articulate to the convention why this is a substantive change. Therefore, there will be no record in minutes or elsewhere, why this is a substantive change, meaning that it's going to come down to a grammar argument in the future. Now,
All right,
if we
right.
can
I'll
articulate,
I'll just withdraw if there's no objection. Thanks.
is there any objection to withdrawal of the comma? Thank you. Without objection, we are now back on the primary. I mean, the substitute. Mr. Alvstead, then I have Mr. Choco and Mr. Brungart. Mr. Alvstead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I guess I don't know if this belongs here or when we talk about the two together, but this language right here, I don't think a normal person would have any idea what we're talking about in this sentence. I mean, that as much as I get that secession is a loaded word, at least people understand what it means. I don't think that political self-determination and adding of jurisdictions maybe makes it a little closer to what we're trying to say, but even that I thought was still not the same. That we need to just either say secession if that's what we mean, or not have this clause in here at all. But all right, that's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. I have Mr. Choco, then Mr. Brungart and Mr. McCose.
Okay, so you noticed that I put some language in the chat a couple minutes ago. I'm not moving that yet. I want to understand what happens if I do move that.
Okay, what Mr. Choco put into chat is we recognize the right to political self-determination, comma, including withdrawal from a territorial government, period. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. This is a very, very substantive change that would be a substitute for a substitute. What would then happen is there would be no amendment allowed because that's the second level of amendment on the substitute. We would be able to debate it, but it would go to an immediate vote without amendment after debate.
Okay.
I have never in my time as chairing any committee ever had to deal with a substitute to a substitute. So you would be my first.
Well, that's like, I'd have a very special place in your heart is what you say.
This happened at the New Hampshire convention, and the look of utter terror in the eyes of the chair when I told him he had a substitute to a substitute was priceless.
I think I want to go ahead and do it.
Okay, so we have a substitute to a substitute. It's in the chat, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Choco has moved to replace the substitute with, we recognize the right to political self-determination, comma, including withdrawal from a territorial government, period. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Choco?
I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I feel like it addresses a lot of the concerns that have been brought up and makes this a little bit more clear what we're talking about, and
Okay.
and still doesn't use the word secession.
Okay, thank you. I had Mr. Brungart next. Did you wish to speak on the substitute for the substitute, or wait till we get to the just substitute?
I was going to speak on the substitute, so I'd like to stay in line for that, but I will quickly say I like this.
Okay, thank you very much. Same thing for Mr. McHose. I had you on the original substitute. Would you also like to speak on the substitute for the substitute? Did we lose Mr. McHose? I do
My
not.
apologies, I'm back.
Okay.
I lowered my hand, I thought. Yeah, I was gonna just actually, I lowered my hand because of Matt Choco's amendment.
Okay, great.
I'm in favor of this one.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yes, I wanted to speak against territorial governments. I mean, for my thought, I don't know what anybody else would think in the general public. I picture, let's go out to Arizona territory in a stagecoach or on the train and ride a horse. And that's the kind of thing that we had out in the Old West for territorial governments. I mean, that doesn't sound like anything people would actually recognize today. I know, and in fact, today it would pretty much be like Guam or the Virgin Islands or something. So I don't think that term would resonate with anyone to know what it even meant. under what we're trying to talk about. So I would oppose that wording. But Madam Chair, I do have a question for you though.
Yes.
Once this is disposed of, how could we get to combining the two ideas? For example, we recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others, combining wording from both of those proposals. Is there a way to get to that after we're done with this particular amendment?
Yes, when we are back to having a perfected substitute, the original primary is open to amendment again if amendment of the substitute has led to additional ideas. We keep going back and forth between the two until we agree we have the perfected examples of both of them before we vote between the two.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Mr. Grindle.
I'm sorry, can I make a parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Alfred.
If we accept the substitute to the substitute, then doesn't that mean that we can no longer amend the substitute, since it's once a substitute takes over for a main motion, it's no longer amendable?
No, it becomes then the first substitute rather than the substitute for the substitute, and is amendable again to one level.
Really? So, but in the substitute, if a substitute is accepted as the main, it's no longer amendable.
Right, it's not accepted yet though.
But
This
a
is
second level substitute getting accepted for a substitute doesn't have the same limitation?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a very rare unicorn indeed. Mr. Grindle?
Mild point of information. So once this comes down to a simple one level substitution, we would be able to make motions to amend, such as removing the word territorial, right? That would be in order?
Right, if the substitute for the substitute passes and becomes the primary substitute, then yes, that would be in order. And substitutes for substitutes, Mr. Alfred, are dealt with in a footnote on the section on substitutes. It is and also, just so you know, after listening to last week's meeting, I went to the temple, otherwise known as the Robert's Rules of Order Forum, to ask all kinds of questions on substitutes to make sure I had this down. And the priests have spoken. Mr. Cholko.
I just want to make sure that I understand everything that's been discussed here. So if the substitute to the substitute passes and it becomes the substitute, then it's open to one level of amendment, just like it were the original substitute, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to point out that I think that there sounds like there might be some ideas for improvement, and I have an idea as well. So I think my position would be that if we think this is better than the existing substitute, let's pass it, and then, you know, we can drive Omar crazy by working on it further at that time.
Okay. And you are correct, Mr. Cholko, that would be in order.
Madam Chair, can I make another parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Alston.
It says the footnote in 1269 says it is thus possible to introduce a proposed substitute for a substitute which cannot be amended, since
Right,
it is the secondary amendment.
It can't be amended while it is a substitute for a substitute. That's why no amendments are being allowed to the substitute for the substitute.
Okay.
Once it becomes the substitute, it's amendable to one level.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome. Seeing no further discussion on the substitute for the substitute, Mr. Secretary, when you are ready, and this is what we will be voting on, is as to whether the substitute for the substitute will become the substitute. So if voting yes, the substitute will become, we recognize the right to political self-determination, including withdrawal from a territorial government. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. A no vote would leave the substitute as, we recognize the right to political self-determination without having to obtain the permission of others.
Madam Chair, point of information.
Yes.
I'm sorry. A no vote is for. Okay, I know.
Does anyone else need me to explain this again? I want us to be clear on how what we're voting on.
We're voting to make the substitute for the substitute become the top level substitute. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, a yes vote would make it the first level substitute. A no vote would keep the substitute that I had originally proposed.
Okay. Here we go. Gary Alvestead.
Aye.
Paul Grindle.
Pass.
Ted Brown.
Nay.
Joe Brunhart.
Yes.
Matt Choco.
Aye.
Ken Max.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Tim McMaster.
Nay.
Omar Curl will abstain. McMaster was a nay. Clayton Cachado.
Aye.
Aye. Curry Taylor.
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay. I'll get this on the screen for everybody. I know we passed somebody. Someone was
That was me, and it is an aye.
that was Paul Grindle as an aye, right?
Okay. So it looks like the substitute for the substitute is now the primary substitute, which is now amendable to one level. And I had Mr. Cholko on deck.
I actually was hoping some other people would go first so I could see some thoughts. So let me put my.
Okay, so Mr. Grindle,
Motion to amend to strike the word territorial.
so it would just say from a government.
Yes.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to strike the word territorial. So debate shall be limited to striking that. There's no further amendment allowed. We will just debate and then vote. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, just I'd like to echo the earlier concerns that were brought up. I forgot by who, about the language territorial government. I do think that it reads a little weird, and just simply saying from a government makes the point we're trying to make very clear.
Thank you, Mr. Grindle. I would like to just exercise a limited prerogative to speak as the mover of the original substitute. I do like this better than my original substitute with the word territorial stricken, because it implies something that Mr. Cachado brought up earlier without having to get into big explanations that it would include secession down to the right or self-determination down to the right of the individual, or not necessarily the individual, of groups of people. So I do think this is a superior substitute if the word territorial is stricken. Would anyone else like to speak?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Where's territorial being added?
It's being stricken.
Oh, it's being struck. Territorial.
Yeah, I know
Oh,
I
I
say
see it.
struck. I know I
I
say
see it.
strucken. I know that's not right. I do it constantly.
No, it's okay. I know what you're saying. I was just looking for territorial. So it's just one word being struck.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, this may be your next move, but I did not amend.
Who amended that?
That was
That was me.
Mr. Grindle.
Ah, sorry. Thank you. That does matter.
Is there any further debate or discussion on striking the word territorial? Is there any objection to striking the word territorial? Seeing none, the word territorial is stricken. We are still on the substitute, which is open to one level of amendment. Mr. Cholko.
Okay, so I'm going to propose an amendment. I just put it in chat, and I just before the secretary and everyone gets pissed off, I'm just trying to get us to the best wording. So I mildly support my amendment. What it is striking withdrawal from a government and replacing with the word secession. And purpose there is that I think this statement now contextualizes secession, making it a little bit safer for us to use that word here. And it makes it absolutely clear what we're talking about here.
And Mr. Secretary, if you will note that Rachel Nix has entered the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, do you understand the amendment, Mr. Secretary?
Nope, I will look in the chat. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to do the thing.
I believe he is wishing to strike withdrawal from a government and insert secession.
That is correct.
So it would read, we recognize the right to political determination, including secession. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. I had Mr. Brown, and then I will put myself.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favor. I'm not afraid of saying secession, and I do think that wording makes it a little better. We're coming right out with explaining what we're talking about a little more, and I agree with that contextual part. So I would certainly move to put that wording in there.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I've just got, if you guys saw the flow chart I had here between all of the various speakers, it would be quite amazing. I'm not going to vote either way, but I see how it does contextualize secession, but saying including secession makes me wonder what else the self-determination is. The original intent, though, you can always go far from the intent, but the original intent of the substitution was for self-determination to be a stand-in for secession. But when you say including secession, makes me wonder what else it potentially includes that we're not saying. And I think it opens it up to a whole kind of weird, it says including secession, okay, but what else? It raises a lot of questions in my mind as to what else, what unintended implications we could be importing into here. Mr. Grindle.
I was going to say almost everything that you had just said, to be honest. I do additionally want to, I guess, make the point that the language self-determination, at the risk of this being a repeat of previous discussion, allows for more people who would be put off by the language secession to be able to buy into what is a very core and important libertarian concept. So I think there is a lot of explicit value in using the language self-determination without the language secession.
I'm waiting for the secretary just to make sure we are all clear where we're at.
Yeah, Madam Chair, help me out here.
Sure.
We're striking withdrawal from.
We're striking, the amendment is to strike withdrawal from a government and insert secession.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Omar, I will buy you dinner or a night of beers in Reno.
I appreciate that.
Omar, tell them you want to go to Ruth's Chris or something super expensive.
I would probably do that. You're doing enough work. We'll go wherever you want.
Okay, so we're still, there's no further amendment allowed, but debate is certainly allowed. Would anyone else like to speak to striking withdrawal from a government and inserting secession in the substitute? I already know there is objection. So we will move to a vote on this amendment whenever the secretary is ready.
Trying to just get everything here, switch the next ballot. 1 second. Alrighty, and this is Gary Alstead.
Aye.
Okay, Paul Brindle.
Nay.
Okay, Ted Brown.
Aye.
Joe Brunhart.
Unfortunately, no.
Matt Choco.
Would you pass me for a minute?
Ken Matz,
Aye.
hang on 1 second. Josh McHose,
Aye.
Tim McMaster,
Aye.
Omar Pro abstain. Clayton,
Abstain.
okay. And Curry Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay, give me a second here, Madam Chair. Something got messed up here. Yes. Okay, I think if I didn't, let's skip anybody. I feel like we skipped-
Matt Chalco passed,
yeah.
and I'm marked as a yay. Which you can just go ahead and leave that yay there.
No, you're empty here. Look, see.
Oh, I'm looking at a different ballot. Sorry, I'm on a small screen. You're right. Go ahead and mark me as a yay.
Okay, so we have 8 in favor, 2 opposed, 2 express abstentions.
Okay, so that passes. Just wait for you to get back. And I see we are at 3:52. And where we are at parliamentary wise is we have now the substitute, which the amendment would read, we recognize the right to political self-determination, including secession. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. And we have the primary, which is off the screen at this moment.
I'll get them back.
Yep.
Just a second.
I would really love for us to dispose of this meeting, but that would require a motion to extend.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Brungard.
motion to extend to 3:15.
So a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes
Yes, ma'am.
past the normal ending time. Okay, is there an objection to a 15-minute extension?
Request point of information.
Yes, Mr.
That-
Tolka.
Why do we need an extension now? There's still 7 or 8 minutes of meeting left. Theoretically, we could vote twice and be done.
In theory, because I'm
Anyway, the motion's
judging
been
the-
made, so yeah, the motion's been made, so forget about that comment.
I'll move to adjourn as soon as we're done with this. Don't worry, Matt.
Is there an objection to the motion to extend the meeting time for an additional 15 minutes past the normal ending time? No objection. Where we are at right now is there any further debate or amendment on the substitute? Mr. Brungart, did you mean to leave your hand up?
No.
Okay, is there any further debate or amendment back to the primary? If we could get that on screen, Mr. Secretary.
Oh, that was the wrong thing. Hold on.
I do see Mr. Brown once we have everything on screen.
I'm in right now.
So is the next thing up to vote on whether the substitute becomes the primary?
Yes, Mr. Cholko, if
I
there's
mean,
no
unless
further,
Mr. Brown does something, yeah. Okay.
yeah, unless he does something. And I heard the undertone there. Mr. Brown. Are you about to make Mr. Cholko want to kill you? You're muted.
I can't very well want to kill anybody for making this more work.
Mr. Brown, you are muted. You are still muted.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Basically, with the 2 sentences, I want to move that into 1 sentence as you had proposed originally on the substitute. We recognize the right to political secession. How was it? Which should not require the permission of others. What was your wording?
Oh,
on your
the original substitute was, Mr. Secretary, if you could scroll up to my original substitute. without having to obtain the permission of others.
Exactly, that wording instead. That's flows a lot more smoothly because my original amendment was amended and it didn't sound as
Yeah.
good. So that putting that as one sentence is a lot clearer.
Okay, if you could scroll back down, Mr. Secretary. What Mr. Brown is doing is he wishes to amend the primary to say, we recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others.
So we're just adding others at the end then.
No, you're striking that sentence. Those who wish to secede should not have to obtain permission. And instead inserting, removing that period and striking that sentence and putting in without having to obtain the permission of others.
Oh, okay.
It's making it one sentence instead of two.
Yeah, well, I gotta remove this period too because this is
Yeah.
a period as well. And then
Without having to obtain the permission of others.
I'm just copying text from your
Yeah.
old substitute here. And adding it to the end here.
Did you wish to speak to that further, Mr. Brown?
Yes, I just think that that's it flows better, and it's certainly, if you're comparing the two proposals, that makes the original proposal sound a lot more accessible.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak to that amendment? All right, is there any objection to that amendment to the primary? Seeing none, that is adopted. Is there any further amendment or debate to either the primary or the substitute? Okay, perfect. Where we are voting on now is, shall the substitute motion become the primary motion or main motion, or shall the primary remain the main motion? The way the substitute reads is to add, we recognize the right to political self-determination, including secession. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. That is the substitute. We are voting on whether that should supersede the original, which is now, we recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others. A yes would make the substitute the main motion. A no would leave what Mr. Brown just amended as the main motion, and then we would vote on whether to adopt whatever the main motion happened to be. So are we clear on what we are voting on right now, which is whether or not the substitute shall become the main motion?
Point of parliamentary inquiry, or sorry, personal privilege, I guess.
Sure, Mr. Taylor.
I don't believe I'm seeing the same language twice on the screen, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong place. I want to find the main motion and the substitute.
Okay, the main motion. Mr. Secretary, I don't want to tell you how to organize your screen.
This is the main motion right here,
That's
as
the main,
amended. And this is the
and
substitute
that's the substitute
as amended.
as amended.
I just have it all. I have this all black and this.
Got it. It's not blue. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready, we will be doing a roll call vote on whether the substitute shall become the main motion.
Yeah, it's just, they do have similar wording, obviously. All right, let me see if I have to get a new sheet here. I think I do. New page. All right, adopt substitute motion. Okay, Gary Alstead.
No.
And Paul Grindle.
Aye.
Ted Brown.
No.
Joe Brunhart.
No.
Matt Choco.
Aye.
Ken Matz.
Nay.
Josh McHose.
I'm a little confused on the vote. It looks exactly like the statement before where we have written, crossed out those who have wished to secede should not have to obtain the permission. I'm just trying to make sure, just because like I say, it looks exactly the same as the one at line 34.
Line 34 is, we're not voting on any.
Okay, I thought that was adopted. That's what it says, without
Yeah.
objection. So that's why I'm a little confused. It says it was adopted without objection. It looks exactly the same to me.
What
Okay.
the substitute is, Mr. Secretary, if you could blue out on where you have number 33 there, we recognize the right to political self-determination, including, if you can make that blue.
Yeah, because that's not the original text, right?
Right, that it's not that we
There you
are voting on whether to make that language the main motion. If we vote it down, the one right below it, we recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others, will be the main motion.
So we're voting on number 33.
Yes.
Okay, I will vote nay. Actually, no, I'm voting aye. Sorry, got confused.
This is why I leave the text on the screen and then I come back and show you guys the vote tally because it gets a little confusing. So that's an aye vote. We are
Yes,
at
aye.
we're at Tim McMaster, Pennsylvania.
Nay.
Nay. Omar Curl will vote nay. Clayton Cachado.
Nay.
Curry Taylor.
Nay.
John Thompson.
Abstain.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put this on the screen now. Sheet number 5. There's a lot of roll calls there. All righty. Did I miss anyone? Did I miss anyone? Madam Chair, I'm showing 3 in favor, 8 opposed, and 1 express abstention.
Okay, so the primary remains the main motion as amended, which I'll give you one moment.
Yes. Okay.
Which is, we recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others. Mr. Broomgart.
Okay, first of all, I apologize to everyone for this. I'd like to propose a substitute. I'm putting it in the chat right now, exactly how I would like it worded.
Okay.
And my reasoning for proposing this is the wording that the Michigan people that I represent liked the most. Thank you.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I got it.
I am going to suggest something at this point. I do not think the 15-minute, I could be wrong, but I would suggest that we take up from here at our next meeting. We've been speaking for 3 hours, but it's up to the committee. We have another
So
15
moved.
minutes. So,
I-
Mr. Cachado, are you moving to adjourn at this point?
Yes, and to postpone
It would
this.
automatically go to the next meeting.
Perfect. I am moving to adjourn.
Just want to be clear that motion, the substitute is on the floor now, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Berngart's substitute is live. If the motion to adjourn passes, I gotta look at whether that's debatable or not. I hope nobody wants to debate adjournment because I think we'll burn out our 15 minutes. This is exactly where we will be starting. Adjourn ordinary case. It is not debatable. All right, we will. Is there any objection to adjourning at this time? Mr. Broomgart, your hand is raised. I don't know if you're objecting.
I'm not.
And okay, so we will be adjourned. We will meet next Thursday. Mr. Broomgart, you'll be the first person to speak to your substitute when we get to business. Also on the floor, I believe, somebody can correct me if I am wrong, we have a couple of reconsiderations that notice was given of on the list. But so we're not impeding this discussion, which we have a good flow of, I will put the reconsiderations later in the agenda. This will be the very first thing on the agenda next time, so that we keep our flow going and not interrupt this thought. So we are adjourned now at 4:06. I will send out, most likely this evening, the first draft of an agenda, and I will see you all next Thursday. And I thank you all for your hard work on this.
Thanks, everybody.
Great
Thank
week,
you.
everyone. Take care.
The next meeting is
Thursday,
this Thursday, not next Thursday, right?
right? We're meeting
This-
now
yeah.
every Thursday for the rest of the Thursdays in March at 9 Eastern.
Hey, Joe, hang out, please, because it seems like this is amending the actual main language. I see commas here where I don't see commas up here.
It's a substitute. It's an entirely, with the substitute, he could do whatever he likes.
Yeah.
I don't care about.
You don't care about the commas before?
Joe,
Yeah, whatever you.
Can you please get with Omar off list? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
without, and make sure he has, you two discuss it, and Omar get it to me for the agenda.
Yeah, yeah. So this way we know, what the markup language is and what it would look like adopted, because it's, I'm looking at this and I'm going, where's it different?
He
with you,
added some
Omar.
language where it says abolish or withdraw from it.
Right.
Right. okay.
That's the substantive difference. I don't care about commas or anything.
Okay,
Motion-
I'll clean this up in between the,
Okay,
Mhm.
everyone. It doesn't look like we have, we have Lynn who has stuck around. You are a warrior, Lynn. I always ask the committee if there's any members of the public who have stayed. If you have any comments or input for the committee, Lynn, you're more than welcome to get on the microphone. If not, we will all see you guys next week on Thursday. Okay, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Joe, that language
night.
that's a complete substitution?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.